don't have to swear it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here as always.
Hey, oh, there we go.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I have like an external camera and for some reason it didn't want to connect, so I just took it off.
Just if you're in Streamlabs, just check your input. It does it with mine occasionally. It turns my main
Yeah.
mic off.
It turned my mic off, but there we go. I'm back. I'm back. I can see they can hear me. So apologies about that because they couldn't hear a word I was saying.
Let's
So
start the show again.
well, we're live on YouTube, but we're not recording for the audio pod. So we just chat when we start off anyway. I don't know if you boys have a hard out for time or if you would like us to keep
Not at
to
all.
anything.
No.
No, I'm good.
Fantastic. Right. Sorry about that, folks. Admin error. Never mind. CJ, our Vikings fan, as he showed you just a minute ago, but a long-standing friend of the show who... the first time you came on must have been like 2.5 years ago now or something, man. It's been
Possibly even longer, yeah.
Yeah. So one of our oldest guests, and yeah, thank you for coming back. And Kieran, and you might be able to answer me on this. I don't know whether we've actually had anyone from the Irish Bears show on the show before, because I think we've come on, and Kieran, you may know this, we've come on your show a few times, but we've never kind of worked it out in terms of getting you guys on. So, welcome.
Yeah, no, it's great to be on. It's a interesting time of the year, but yeah, no, I try and remember the different people that have come on the show over the years, and it's crazy. My memory is so bad when it comes to that, but yeah, no, it's always good to be able to talk about it, and it's also nice that there's no Packers fans here, so we can actually shit talk them the whole time. So that's good.
Oh, it's
I
such a
was about to
shame.
say, isn't it great to be in a room where we have the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFC North? The first time in forever. Whatever order they may be in, we don't know, but we know Green Bay's is at the bottom.
Not if you ask a Packer fan, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute, did you say top 3 then?
Yeah?
Sure.
Well,
Kirk Cousins, Vikings, second string quarterback, and the third string quarterback?
Oh, come
Hey!
on.
Right.
Right.
Saying that, I don't even think off the top of my head we've actually got a third string quarterback, or if we do, I couldn't tell you who it would even be.
I couldn't tell you who your backup quarterback is.
They just drafted him, didn't they? The BYU guy. Jared Hall's there now, isn't he?
Jaron Hall.
Yeah, Jaron Hall, yeah.
According
Nick
to
Mullins, that's the
ESPN,
other
though,
one.
it's Nick Mullins.
Yeah.
Who's a reasonable backup.
I was happy with the acquisition of Nick Mullins.
Hey, he could be
Other
better.
Vikings fans, not so much.
He could be better than Jordan Love.
I was about to say,
Love
how
be fifth in
could
the
Jordan
division.
Love be in San Francisco? That's the real test. Could Jordan Love operate that offense? Because Mullins was electric for those 4 games or whatever it was. Right. Shall we save some content for the audio pod?
Yeah.
Right. Let's get this on the road.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode 205, Battle for the North. I'm Matthew Turner alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick, and I've got alongside me 2 fantastic guests. CJ repping the Minnesota Vikings, and Kieran from the Irish Bears show. Boys, welcome. Thank you for coming on. CJ, you've been a few times before, but Kieran, your first time on the show, so cracking. Thanks for coming on, boys.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. It's always good to be able to talk football. We're nearly at training camp. We keep saying this on our show. It's like we're nearly there, but there's still another week to go. So
And likewise, Kieran, thanks for being a part of the show. Not that it's obviously anything to do with me. Matthew and Anthony have organised this, and much appreciated to the lads for having me on for possibly the third, maybe fourth time now. I've lost count.
Yeah, more
how
than
many times I've been, possibly even more, and it's nice to actually be involved, as the lads have said pre going live. Having a discussion without a Packers fan and actually having a Bears fan to throw into the mist as well. So much appreciated to you being present here as well.
Just want to throw in there as well. So we would try to get Peter on, who actually writes for the UK and Irish Packers. He writes their draft guide. We had him on during the draft and was a terrific guest. Like, really, maybe the most friendly Packers fan I've ever met. And I mean that exactly as it sounds.
You don't need to be nice. You don't need to be nice to them.
No, but no, he came back and said that he came back and said he was feeling ill. So I just want to send out my best wishes to him, because I don't think he's feeling the best right now. So I hope Peter's feeling okay if he's watching, and hopefully we'll get him on another time soon. But we are going to be talking about the NFC North, and I'm not going to bore you guys with all the gumph out there, but I will lead things off with just that little bit of news that we had over this week, which is a little bit of fluff, but I don't care because it's going to benefit me. PFF Sam Monson ranked Ben Johnson the #1 offensive coordinator in the NFL. What do you reckon? Because that feels okay to me.
I mean, we looked at the rest of that top 10 and we're just like, oh dear God.
Yeah, Kellen Moore #2. Really?
The standard of OC in the NFL at the minute, it seems to be pretty bad, but even if it was a good class, Ben deserves to be up there. What he's done with this team since Anthony Lynn was dispatched a year and a half ago is, we do not go back to those days. He's been able to make a star out of this offense. Last year we started hot. Everyone said, "Oh, they're going to regress. We didn't. We had those 2 games where we'd lost all our playmakers and not even the best guys can do well with that. But for the most part, we've been amazing. And Goff looks so much better than when he first came here.
One would say, Anthony, from obviously being present in the Roar of the Lions and the Lions Discord quite often throughout the majority of last season. I remember the meltdowns when you guys lost a lot of your playmakers. As a Vikings fan, was rather pleasant to watch the meltdown, just to obviously stir the shit pot, if you will. But from the other perspective, and obviously the amount of love that I've got for you guys as Lions fans, and obviously how hospitable you were when I was over you guys were when I was over in Detroit in 2019. It's all said in jest, but meant in love. Not quite there with the Bears fans yet. I've not been to Chicago, the murder city as they call it, to visit their fans and get stabbed, shot, or beaten up either or.
Oh, come on.
But I'm sure if it's anything similar to the Minnesota Knights and the Detroit fans being the North, not ever going to Lambeau, but obviously, Kieran, if you're ever over in Chicago and I find myself over there available, I'm sure I'll be hanging out with you guys for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ignore that comment about the city of Chicago because I completely disagree. But yeah, no, it's good. It's even I've been to games between all the different kind of teams in the North, and it's a different experience depending on where you go. I like to go to some of the away matchups because you get to kind of experience something different. I've been to the Lambeau. Didn't enjoy it, even though the one time I did go, the Bears did win that game. But wow. It's an interesting place. Let's just leave it at that. It's a very interesting place. But yeah, no, I've always enjoyed going to kind of Bears Lions, Bears Vikings games. It's always fun to kind of go to those divisional matchups. It's a bit of a different anticipation going into those games.
I feel like it's really ratcheting up now with Green Bay and the quarterback gone. There's a power void now for the first time in forever, and I can feel it. I can feel it in this off season. It's like last year. It's like we're getting there now. Everybody's getting there, and it's like who's going to climb to the top, and you can feel it. You can really feel it this year more than I just want this season back. It's
not far away. It's not far away. We're getting there. Last bit of news I had about the Lions, but it pertains to the most recent draft cycle. And I know that, Kieran, you probably got into it heavily. CJ, we talked to you during the draft. I think that you were not massive on getting involved in the draft process, if I remember rightly. But
not as much this time around. But
so Brad Holmes went on the Peter Schrager podcast, our GM, And he revealed that the Lions had, when it came to draft day, just 14 players that they had a first round grade on, which is a notable point of that podcast. Did you feel like it was a lower strength draft at the top? Did that kind of ring true with you? And I mean, we'll come on to your drafts and free agency periods in a sec, but just the draft as a whole, did that ring true to you?
Yeah, for me, absolutely. When we were discussing for pretty much the entire offseason about what was going to happen in the draft, we were, even when the Bears had the number one pick, we were thinking of where do they want to move down. And some fans were like, oh, you can move down into the mid-teens to get multiple first round picks. And I was like, I don't really want to go too far outside the top 10 because like, even I know there was, when everyone was talking about the quarterbacks, I really only had like one or two of them that I thought could genuinely play this year. And I was like, you want to kind of stick in that top 10. Personally, when I was looking at it, I was like, if you're comparing this to other years, I had it at roughly the same, where it was like probably 15, 16 players that was like legitimately in most years would be stereotypical first round picks. I think what we said is kind of when you got to the back half of the first round up until maybe the start of the third round, there wasn't a big difference between a lot of the players. And that's where I think a lot of teams try to target in terms of getting more picks at that area. So I'm not surprised when you say that the GM said that there was 14, because I think that was kind of a consensus with a lot of GMs and a lot of personnel guys. Like, we heard loads of rumors about with the Bears that I think Ryan Poles had like 11 players that he had in his kind of target, not including the quarterbacks, which is kind of then looking at the 13 or 14. So I think a lot of those GMs probably had a very similar kind of set group of players as well. So yeah, not surprising, probably legitimate in what he said.
I mean, one thing that I want to pick up on the back of that as well there, Kieran, is when you mentioned about obviously the depth of the draft from the latter half of round 1 into round 3. In some cases, obviously going beyond. I mean, it's not the first time that we've come across players that have been taken in that sort of bracket and beyond. Obviously, looking at Stefan Diggs, who obviously Minnesota had a very, very good period of time with him prior to him turning into a bit of a diva and moving over to Buffalo. But obviously, it goes to show that there can be those diamonds in the rough, or, you know, the precious stones and gems, if you will, found in the later rounds. So it's not all the case of, like you say, finding those initial 14, 15 players in round 1 early doors and getting that early draft pick.
Yeah, I think it's more of, when I look at it, it's the whole risk and reward type, that if you're towards the top of the draft, you want to get a guy in that you feel like you can play early on and not have to worry. Like, they're all good. Like, this is why I love kind of the draft cycle, but then I always then have to tell people when it comes to the rookie seasons for these guys is like, you still have to remember they're rookies. They're going to take their lumps. They're not going to be the perfect prospect. Doesn't matter kind of who it is. But there's also going to be guys that you'll get in the second or third round that were just in the wrong system in college that are going to do something different in the NFL, and it'll suit them. Or someone that didn't get the proper coaching in college comes to a professional organization and they're able to light it up. That's why we see guys that go in like the third, the fourth, the fifth round, and early on in their career, they're able to make it in the NFL and be starters. And we'll see the same thing. There'll be a couple of guys that people will never have heard of really from some team in the NFL. And they're like, how did he fall so far? And it's usually to do with situation. And it's interesting to see what's going to happen this year. I just think in terms of when we kind of talk about those guys, where when we say legit kind of first round talent is where you expect to be the starter from the outset. And I think that's probably where we're at. I think with the fact that the quarterbacks now get so inflated, like, we end up having kind of, I would say, between like 14 to 20 guys without the quarterbacks every single year that you say are probably first round picks. But then we're seeing every single year now, it looks like there's 4 quarterbacks to get picked in the first round unless it's a really bad draft class. And this year I think is going to be a very interesting one to see how those first round quarterbacks do, because it was a very interesting first round for those guys.
Right, let's kick this off by going team by team. I'm going to go alphabetically by the Bear, Lion, Packer, Viking mantra. And so we're going to start with the Bears. And just before we go, Kieran, we've chatted a bit with you already, but for the guys who haven't watched the RS Bears show before, who are watching or listening, just give us a bit about you and about the show and how long it's been going for, because it's a fairly long tenured thing now, right?
Yeah, this is our third season now. So we would have started the show probably the start of free agency before Justin Fields was drafted from the Bears. And honestly, we did it with the intention of just wanting to be able to give people a voice in talking about the team, because at the time it seemed like it was all the kind of very big podcast and all kind of the reporters and stuff, and people would follow that. And we wanted to kind of get more of the fans to get their kind of opinion across, and not we've always kind of invited different people on for that. So we started off about whatever it is 3 years ago now, and it's just kind of kept growing and growing and growing, and it's been a lot of fun. Like this year we have so many things coming up for like training camp in terms of the people that we'll be getting on. We've been able to get some of the players on recently as well. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, it's one of those that I think you guys know yourself of what you do. It's just it makes the season, I think, a bit more fun, regardless of how your team is doing, because you have something to talk about. It's kind of like when you have a bad game, you get to vent your frustrations. When you have a good game, you get to kind of enjoy it with people. Or even if there's a good bit of news that normally you might be hyped about by yourself, you actually get to kind of build that with the community as well. And I think that's probably the funnest part of doing the entire thing, is just like getting to see that people enjoy what you do. But also the fact that we try and give back to the community as much as we can and stuff. Like I think last year we were able to give away a couple of copies of like Madden. We were able to give away like different like merchandise and all that sort of stuff. And we always open up like our fantasy football league for a couple of people to be able to join, because I think there's like 7 or 8 of us in our group, and we try to get like a 12-team league. So we always like to, as much as we can, to give stuff back to the people that follow us. And yeah, it's been a wild 3 years, and hopefully it's a little bit more fun when the Packers suck again. That'll be nice. So
Packers always suck.
That's never changed.
Unfortunately, that has not been true, but still.
All right, so let's have a look at the Bears off-season, and it all started with the blockbuster trade, trading out number 1, getting DJ Moore from the Panthers, number 9, 61, a 2024 first, and a 2025 second. With that capital, they went and got Darnell Wright, Gervon Dexter, Tyreek Stevenson, Zach Pickens, Roschon Johnson, Tyler Scott, Noah Sewell, Terrell Smith, Travis Belt, and Kendall Williamson. And then in free agency, you were the big spenders in the division, really, going hell for leather with people like Tremaine Edmonds and Nate Davis and DeMarcus Walker and TJ Edwards. Even got an upgrade at backup quarterback with Philip Walker, who's a Lions destroyer, as we all well know. Didn't have too many high-profile losses, really. Trevor Siemian departed okay, and David Montgomery came to us. And I know that there's quite a few Chicago fans who've kind of said, "Oh, look after him," and all that sort of stuff. I feel like there's no hard feelings in that, even though he threw a little bit of shade on his first press conference. But I feel like every free agency person kind of does that a little bit. So
I think they all do. I think they all do that because they try and get like the new fans on board. So I think it's normal.
So you obviously finished the season 3-14 after a 2-1 start. So it was kind of a rough back end to that season. But the difference in the roster then and the roster now is night and day. It feels like the arrow's very much up for you, Kieran.
Yeah, it's completely different. Like we went into last year knowing it was going to be a rough season. I think every fan was really just going into it just looking for development from some of the young players, because they knew that was going to be at least a year, because I didn't even treat last year as the rebuild. I was treating last year as kind of the teardown. And then because they didn't really add much in the offseason last year, so you knew what was coming. And then this was the offseason where you started to see kind of change happen. And like you said, it started with DJ Moore. Everybody knew it was going to start with whatever they did with that first overall pick. Who would they trade it to? There was multiple teams involved. Like I remember talking to a couple of people a few days into it where there was a lot of rumors after the combine that the Panthers were involved. There was rumors that the Colts were involved, and I think a trade nearly happened between the Bears and the Colts, and then the Panthers got they got kind of a little bit worried there, and that's when the whole DJ Moore thing happened. So I think it was ideal because if you asked any Bears fan going into the offseason what was one of the most important things, it was you need to get another offensive tackle and you needed to get a number one wide receiver. And the fact that they were able to get the haul that they did, but also get DJ Moore, it fit exactly what they were looking for. I think the biggest surprise for a lot of fans was that they didn't address the edge rusher too much, and there's still an expectation that they may do so. But overall, when you look at the roster, yeah, they've improved quite a lot. Like I think our linebacker core last year after Roquan was traded away was I think Jack Sanborn was the only one that kind of performed to a decent level, and he was a UDFA. So like at the end of the day, he'll still be in there with a shout to start. It'll be probably him or Sewell. One of them will kind of battle it out because Sanborn has been injured up to this point, but I think he's supposed to be healthy for training camp, so that's an interesting one. But yeah, you get TJ Edwards in, you get Tremaine Edmonds. It's a big difference from last year. They get more depth on the interior of the defensive line, which is something they badly needed because we talk about getting kind of pressure on the quarterback, but like teams were able to run all over the Bears last year, and that was something that they needed to fix up. So I think overall what they were able to do, like even some of the smaller additions, like they bringing in Robert Tonyan as a backup tight end, so him and Cole Kmet being able to be there. You brought in a few, like even getting Tyler Scott was a guy I liked in the draft. Getting him as a kind of a depth receiver, that kind of speed, that kind of change of speed guy. Getting in Roshan Johnson, who he was the one guy when you look in a draft process that someone you wanted from the beginning. He was the one that I think everybody on our show and the Bears drafted him just started laughing because I was talking to him since January that I always said that if David Montgomery didn't get re-signed, you need someone that does the same type of thing that David Montgomery does. And he was the one guy in the draft that you look at him and he has the same sort of skill set. So it made a lot of sense. I think a lot of Bears fans are happy with the way the roster has been built. I still think that if you ask kind of honest or realistic Bears fans in terms of where are the expectations, it's not so much where it's that like they're over positive on winning like 10 or 11 games. Like I think a lot of Bears fans are like, they'll probably win 7. And it probably makes sense in terms of you win 3-1. If you can go and win an extra 3 or 4 games here or there, then it shows that it's development. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the division, right? We don't know like what the Packers are going to be like. Will they be terrible?
Shit.
Like if they're going to be terrible, well, then that changes things a little bit, right? I've said this on our show, is that for a certain point, there's plenty of fans in the NFC North that expect their team to win, and someone's going to be disappointed because I look at it online and there's Packers fans saying they're going to win the division. There's Vikings fans saying they're going to win the division. There's Lions fans saying they're going to win the division. And I'm like, someone's going to get disappointed. Someone's not going to get to that win total that people are expecting. And it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because the Vikings clearly had the best record last year, but then everybody brings back the close games. Can they win the same amount of close games as they did last year? The Lions ended the season fantastically, right? Then the question will be, can they continue that on? If they do, well, okay, then that's great. But if they don't, what happens? I think for me, when I talk to most Bears fans, because I kind of put it out there, a lot of what people's expectations are, most people say between kind of 6 to 9 games that they're going to win. And I can kind of see them in that range. I don't think the Bears are going to kind of be as bad as they were last year, but I still don't think they're going to be up there to win the division this year. But I can definitely see improvement where you're looking at it as, okay, this team is developing the right way, and maybe they're a year away from genuinely competing to win the NFC North.
I mean, seven of your losses were one possession games, so it's not like you, even though you had the number one pick, it's not like you were getting blown away in these games. And I think a lot of that was down to Justin Fields and that rushing attack. I don't think he quite got the record in the end, did he, for rushing yards by quarterback in a season? But he got terrifically close with 1,143 as well as his 2,242 passing yards. A lot's been said about Fields so far about whether he's actually a good quarterback, and if he's a good quarterback, how good could he be, and where are the limitations with him, and how are the team limiting him? Where do you see Justin Fields going? Because I think our show is probably a bit more bullish than most on him actually being a good quarterback. Back me up on that, Ant, but we're Fields fans, right? Really, when it comes down to it?
Don't start including me in all this. I do like him, but I'm not going to say that out loud. I'm not going to admit that. Don't be saying. Don't
all
be
right,
saying
okay,
that.
fine. But Kieran, what do you make of Fields' development?
So
Just
I've always.
Sorry,
go
Kieran,
ahead.
just wanted to piggyback on the back of something that Matthew Turman had said, going off the close, like 7 or so one possession games.
7 losses. There was 2 one possession wins, but 7 losses.
But I mean, it's not a thing that I'm unfamiliar with when it comes to NFC teams doing something very, very similar. Because if you remember, before the Vikings actually turned those losses, one possession losses, if you will, into wins last season to go 13-3, we were also on the losing side of the ball game the season before. So it's not a case of it can't be done. And to be quite honest, if the Bears follow the similar sort of game plan and trajectory that we know is very much easy to do on any given Sunday in the NFL, the Bears could turn, if they were to go for the same sort of season with the one possession losses this season, but then be on the winning side of it, could be a completely different ball game for the Bears.
Yeah, it's interesting because they always say, like, what is it, every year that there's always one of those teams that goes from worst to first. Like, and that's the reason is because of those close games. Can you get over it? Can you get, like, a lot of it comes down to luck, right? Sometimes it comes down to a call from a referee. It comes down to a dumb flag that comes out. Like, we all know how those work. But yeah, like, I've said this on the show prior to even when we began, is that I'm completely biased when it comes to Justin Fields because I'm an Ohio State fan as well. So it was like the perfect scenario for me. So like at the time when that draft was coming in, I was just like, just trade whatever you can, just go up and get him. But yeah, like I always kind of laugh at when some people say that he's not a good quarterback because a lot of this comes down to context on these guys when they come in. The Bears have had one of the worst offensive lines in football. And I don't like looking at statistics for offensive line because you only need 2 sources, your left eye and your right eye. Because at the end of the day, and this is the reason why I would always say that Jared Goff had a good year last year, right? Like the Lions offensive line is legit. It's really, really good. Makes it easier for a quarterback to have a little bit more time, be able to read the field. If you have a edge rusher in your face 2 seconds into the snap, or at some point literally straight away, it doesn't help. And the thing is with Justin, the hope is that the offensive line improves to where you can open up the passing game a little bit more. But you also have to remember is these guys that came up against him last year know what he can do with his legs. So that if you do bring too many guys and you break contain, he can kill you. Because there was, at the end of the season last year, there was teams trying to spy him every single time, and teams were doing that, and they were still not able to stop it. Like, you looked at even the Philadelphia Eagles last year. I heard it from a couple of the interviews that some of their players did, and they had a spy on every single play, and he still was able to break off a run for like 70-something yards and get in for a touchdown in that game. And that's a team that was excellent last year, got to the Super Bowl, and you look at it, and if that offensive line improves to even being average this year, I think we see a different Justin Fields where you will see him being able to open up the offense. We saw for halfway through the season last year, and I think it was like 4 or 5 games in a row where the Bears put up like 30, 40 points a game. Like when he has time, he's accurate. The problem is the offensive line in Chicago has been terrible and he hasn't had time. And it's the same in college. When he had time with Ohio State, like he was dead eye accurate, especially in the deep ball. The thing is, you need repetition. And when your offense, if you don't trust your offensive line, it's difficult to get those repetitions in. And I think that's why so many Bears fans were solely focused on improving that offensive line this year, to give him an opportunity to so he can prove that he is the guy. I've always said that you always have to look at these young quarterbacks in the context of the offense that they're in. If they have the weapons and if they have, I always just say an average offensive line, because most teams have below average offensive lines in football. And then there's a couple that are very good. But if you can get to the average point, you give your quarterback an opportunity to win. I think in the last 2 years, the Bears haven't given him an opportunity with the offensive line they had. Like what was it, 2 years ago, their starting left tackle came in 2 weeks before the season started. Last year, their starting right tackle was signed a day before training camp. Like that's not a recipe for success. This year, it's a lot different, right? They have their offensive line together. First round draft pick is your right tackle. You've your left tackle from last year that gets to come in. You made a good acquisition in Nate Davis as a guard. Tevin Jenkins had a season last year. He's your other guard. You have two kind of veteran centers in there where last year, like Bears fans, if you ask anybody who the worst player on the team last year, they'll all say Sam Mustipher at center because he just could not hold his own. So I think this year there's more optimism that the offensive line can be improved. I don't think it's going to be perfect because, like I said, it takes time for rookies when they come in to be successful. We've seen that. I always use the example of like Andrew Thomas in New York, that in his rookie season, he had to take his lumps. But then year 2, he was fantastic. And I think that's going to be similar to the Bears this year. I think Darnell Wright will be probably like average to above average. And then you hope in year 2 is when he looks legit as a very, very good offensive lineman. And I think that's where a lot of the hope comes in for the Bears. If they can be good up front, I think we'll start to see the offense kind of open up more because they have the weapons there to be successful.
Well, it's going to bring you in now, CJ and Ant, just to comment on the Bears. You know, it's been a hell of an off-season with a lot of action. The trades and talking about Fields' prospects and all this investment in the linebackers and what have you, and potentially more to come. You know, there's umpteen veteran edge rushers just waiting for training camp to finish before they can get signed because they're lazy bastards who want a payday and no work. But, you know, they're going to come in. So, yeah, they're coming from the bottom, but it doesn't really feel like that record was really reflective of where that team was. They were in games, and Fields kept them there. So what do you make of where they were to where they are now?
It's a very, very interesting one when it comes with the Bears. Kieran obviously touched on 95% positive in his little section that he did there, and then 5% negative, which, to be quite honest, is about as much as I could probably bring into it. And I know what you and Anthony are trying to do. Could you do it every single time that I come on, as you want me to give them the kiss of death? But I'm reserving that for a special team this year. And before you go, oh God, it's going to happen to us again. No, it certainly is not. The Lions are not getting the kiss of death for the first time in 3 years. So feel very, very privileged, Matt and Anthony. I have not cursed the Lions and the fantastic role of the Lions community this season at this point in time. But yeah, getting on to obviously Justin Fields, because that was the last thing that Kieran was mentioning. Justin Fields is the quarterback, or has some aspects to his skill set as a quarterback that I think a lot of Vikings fans wish we had in Kirk Cousins. When it comes to obviously the passing prowess, and I'm still currently working through the quarterback Netflix show, which is obviously covering Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, Marcus Mariota for the 2022 season. Kirk Cousins is our guy, right? 100% in my opinion. Kirk Cousins is our guy. He's got, as Kieran was touching on, you know, that average or much below average offensive line, which seems to be fluctuating amongst the very, very good at times to absolutely porous aspect to it, which is very, very interesting to watch. Because obviously, in Minnesota terms, as is, as you discovered last season, Matt, and the Lions fans, the Vikings' offensive line could look fantastic one week and then diabolical the next. And it all comes up to matchups against who we're playing. The difference that I think, obviously, Kieran will go, yep, I can see where we're going with this, is Jared Goff and Justin Fields, they have this internal clock, which when a lineman breaches the line from the defensive side of the ball and gets in his face, something inside him just goes, I'm in trouble and I'm getting the fuck out of there. Kirk Cousins, for the example, I don't have to say how many times Aiden Hutchinson put him on his ass in countless Lions-Vikings games. But there was a section where rather than scrambling to try and stay alive and make something happen, Kirk Cousins just folded like a lawn chair and hit the dirt, which, unfortunately for Vikings fans is not what we're wanting to see. But, in certain aspects, it's the safest option. It prevents balls getting knocked out as you're scrambling, getting away from where it needs to be, and obviously taking what could potentially be a much bigger play in aspects. But the problem was the Vikings didn't have the ability 95% of the time to then make up those lost yards and get, progress further down the field. But then touching on, obviously, as you mentioned, the other side of the Bears pickups in the off season when it comes to obviously DJ Moore and the acquisition of the linebackers. Unfortunately, we saw one of my favorite Vikings leave in Adam Thielen, and I'm pretty sure Kieran may have been touching about this in his Discord chats and various communities as such, as Bears fans, about the prospect of Adam Thielen moving across to Chicago. Because I'm sure for a fact that the Vikings fans were in a bit of meltdown in regards to it. Going, that the possibility of it happening. Thankfully, he's moved to pastures new. But obviously, I would have been interested to have heard Kieran's thought process. He's shaking his head to go, no, it's not happening in the slightest. But obviously, the thought and prospect of another Viking moving inside the NFC North to obviously one of our rivals was not a welcome thought in my group, obviously, because we've seen, if I remember rightly, Jared Allen moved across to Chicago for a season or two towards the end of his career, and that was uncomfortable to see, let's say.
I'll be honest, I'd rather have suspended Jameson Williams than Adam Thielen on the Bears.
Yeah. And what do you make of the Bears off season?
Well, I mean, it would be a lie to say they're not better. It is worrying, I guess. They've had a good draft, they've had a good off season. There's a lot of new talent. Obviously, it's going to take time, but like I said, they're kind of, for me, they're the barometer of where we need to be above. They're the year behind us. Like Kieran said last year. Last year was the teardown. Obviously, ours was 2 years ago, and then when it came to last year, I'm like, we've got to beat them twice. We've got to start setting standards. That's where you're at, and we did just. And then you've got to keep going. They're going to take big strides this offseason. They're going to look a lot better next year. And we've got to carry on getting better than them. But, they've been quite sensible about it. Although the one thing that does puzzle me a little bit, and I will ask now because you mentioned it, sort of the DNs, that line's not been touched. The Chicago Bears that we know and have feared for so many years in Detroit, as always, its defense has been built off its line. Like just absolutely caving in teams, leading pressure from the front. I mean, I lose track of the amount of times Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, Eddie Goldman, all these guys absolutely laid waste to us. Yet it still seems to be the area in year 2 now that has passed and gone that they've not tried to fix that part of the defense. Are you surprised that they've not tried to? Because that's what your team has always been based on and what has been so successful. And you actually have a quarterback now, which you never did before when you had this. So you're surprised they've not gone back to that? Yeah, I know you're going for the DTs, but the DNs, it's very bare.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of Bears fans they're asking what are they gonna do there in terms of look, they still have the money if they want to do it. I know the coach and the GM have basically said that they're still looking, and there's plenty of guys that are available that are still out there. Um, and the expectation was that they probably would go and get a defensive end, but I guess the one thing that I go back to is when you bring someone in, I think if you're bringing in a free agent now, you need to bring someone that you just think that can be that bridge guy. Like I don't want them to sign a free agent now on a 2 or 3 year deal because I don't think that that's much point. Like if you want to go and get Yannick Ngakoue for a year, if you want to get an older guy and even just Justin Houston who's played for Matt Eberflus for a year, just to add some competition there, I'm fine with it because you go into next year still having probably one of the healthiest cap spaces in the league, having 2 first round picks that if you really want to, I'd rather them fix that position with someone you believe in long term. Because that's the way they've tried to build this thing. That there's a reason you have all this capital. And I think this is where some Bears fans we've had to kind of look at it as like you can't fix everything in one off season. You have to focus on certain positions. And I do think that they'll end up signing someone as they get very close to camp here and to improve the competition. The one thing that we've always kind of been told once Eberflus came in was the most important position for him was 3-tech and to get the pressure up the middle, and them adding more and more guys there, I think was an important element to it. But it's like when I look at it from last year, and we were saying this on our show because when we were going into the offseason, we're like, the Bears have a lot to do. And then we look at it now and we're like, where's the biggest hole on this team? We're like, well, it's defensive end. But we were actually saying we expected there to be more going into the season, that we'd be like, oh, I'm worried about this position. I'm worried about this position. But for the most part, it's mainly the edge rusher. And I do think that at some point here, they'll probably sign someone. Like there's still plenty of guys that are out there. I don't know what it is. When I was talking to people that kind of had spoken to the Bears GM when they were kind of doing interviews and stuff, most of them were saying that some of the guys that were still out there were looking for too much money, and that's why a lot of the guys weren't getting signed. And I wonder, is it now that once they kind of bring that down onto a 1 year deal, the Bears will probably have a good chance of getting one of these guys? Because look, at the end of the day, they have the most amount of cap space. These players, they always at this point will sign to a team that either can compete for championships or will be able to provide the most money. If it's a 1 year thing, I don't think that's prohibitive for the Bears. They'll be able to bring somebody in, and I think the expectation is it will happen at some point, but I don't think that position is going to be fixed until next year. I think they'll probably sign an edge rusher and they'll probably draft one with one of those 1st round picks. And it's probably long term, if you know that you're likely not going to be winning like the division or winning games in the playoffs this year, there's no point in forcing it on a guy that you don't believe in, right? Now, if there's someone that's available in terms of a trade that you think can take you to the next level, that's a different story, because if you're not having to give up one of those premium draft picks, but it's a guy that wants out of a team and you think that can make you better, I'm fine with that as well. If you're going to give someone an extension, if it's someone you believe that can be a player for you long term. But any of these guys that are out there, I'm like, just give them a 1 year deal and be that bridge edge rusher that can get you whatever it is, 8 to 10 sacks this year. And then next year hit that position hard, because you've done a lot of work this year where you've improved some of the important positions that you knew you had to improve. And if edge rusher is the main one going into next year, and you've 2 1st-round picks, and hopefully, I know a lot of Bears fans are hoping the Carolina Panthers suck this year, because that happens, then it doesn't really matter what we do, because you still get a good draft pick. But I think that's kind of the ideal scenario for the Bears, and it's probably the smart thing to do, rather than just kind of throwing too much money at a guy that probably doesn't deserve it.
I do think a lot of people are sleeping on the Bears. I'm just looking at your depth chart now, and I think a lot hinges on the chemistry of all these new guys coming together early, because they hit the ground running. That's going to be a big difference. The youngsters in the back 4 of the defense, edge rushers, if you just mentioned. Offense, I've got no worries about, bar Justin Fields, if he can do his thing. Let me just read out what this offense is going to be like. Because before, we were last year looking at Cornelius St. Brown as a start for you guys, like laughing, not even secretly laughing,
We,
just
we,
kind of
we were laughing.
Yeah, right. And now, I mean, I hope I'm not exaggerating by saying I think he's on the bubble for the roster. I don't know. Yeah, right. So here we go.
He's
a
probably
different place.
like him and Dante Pettis are probably competing for like the 6th wide receiver.
Exactly. It's a complete change. So obviously Fields starts. Running backs are 3 deep with Donta Foreman, who I'm a massive fan of, did really great things before he came to you guys. Khalil Herbert, who was excellent last year, and Roshan Johnson, who you very adequately has described as the Monty replacement, but he's terrific and we really liked him coming into the cycle. Wide receivers, DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney doesn't have to be the number 1 anymore. Chase Claypool can actually be the 3, and maybe he can actually get back to his early Steelers form, because that's not too far away from him. Tyler Scott as a draft pick, Dante Pettis, Velus Jones, and then Equinemius and Brown. Like, that's a lot more deep than that wide receivers core's been in a long time. Then your offense, your tight ends, Cole Kmet and Bob Tonyan, as you said, that's terrific. Offensive line, Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Cody Whitehair, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright, but then also backed up by people like Lucas Patrick and Larry Borum. You've got Alex Leatherwood as a former first-round pick, it's like OL10. So, like, the offensive line may not be the best in the league, but average seems about fair. And then if you have a look at that defense, you still signed DeMarcus Walker. He might be that bridge guy. That back four that I mentioned, Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, Eddie Jackson, Tyreek Stevenson. Like, if those young guys can come together on the back end of that defense, people are sleeping on the Bears, right?
Yeah, and there's the other thing that people forget about, and it's an important one, is that the Bears are in the fortunate situation that they're going to have the number 1 waiver priority up till week 3. And you always see some guys that kind of fall away. And when I'm saying that, that's where you're looking at the depth guys, right? Like where maybe there's a team that had too many, I don't know, wide receivers or corners or offensive linemen, and someone's let go. Well, suddenly you get to bring in one of those guys that's your 52nd or 53rd guy in the roster. And we see it every single year. It's like that team that has that number 1 guy, or that number 1 waiver priority on final cutdown day, end up adding like 6 or 7 guys, because there's players that sometimes it's veterans that are making too much money, and a rookie has come in and he's just proven that he's able to he's cheaper and he's able to do the job as well. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, I think that's when I was saying that when we were talking about it on our show, that we're actually surprised in terms of there's not quite as many holes as we were expecting at this time of the year. Like when we talk to when there's comments and on our videos and stuff, it's usually to do what edge rusher should the Bears kind of bring in, and the other question is there a better swing tackle that they can bring in? Because like you mentioned guys like Alex Leatherwood, but we've seen kind of what he was doing. A lot of Bears fans are not fans of that, but I think there's always ways to improve the depth on the offensive line. But also the thing is, we all know if you get ravaged with injuries on the offensive line, you're pretty much done, because as we mentioned, most offensive lines are kind of below average to average, and if you lose 1 or 2 of those guys, you're in a bit of trouble. But overall, they've done a good job in terms of providing depth. Like even you mentioned even the defensive backs, right? Like Kyler Gordon's there, Jalen Johnson, who's coming into a contract year, he's going to need to perform as well. Tyreek Stevenson, who has been starting with the ones since he started in terms of the mini camps and stuff. You had Eddie Jackson, Jaquan Brisker as well. Having those guys as well continue kind of the chemistry from last year, having Gordon, Johnson, Eddie Jackson, and Brisker, it's good. And then where we were getting killed was the other outside corner opposite Jalen Johnson was essentially guys that should have been backups in Kindle Vildor, Jalen Jones, or kind of basically guys coming in from the street. When you're able to have someone in there like a Tyreek Stevenson, even they drafted some kind of depth corners as well that could come in, that are athletes that kind of fit the profile of player they want there. I think what they've been able to do this offseason is, one, improve the starting positions, but they've added more depth across the team, where we look at it now and it's 1, 2, 3 positions where you're like, you still need to improve there, but you can't fix everything in one go.
All right, let's move it on to the Lions segment. And I mean, we've talked about the Lions ad nauseum, but maybe we'll just quickly summarize this for you guys to get into the meat of this, and maybe Ant can take it away first as our Lions ref. I'm trying to be neutral, guys. I'm trying. But Lions draft picks this year: Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin, Colby Sorsdal, and Antoine Green. If you guys haven't watched our tape breakdowns I've been doing over the last 2 weekends on Broderick Martin and Colby Sorsdal and Antoine Green, go and check them out because they're really good value. Hendon Hooker and Brian Branch coming up this weekend. The free agency, couple of losses there. DJ Chark, Mike Hughes, Deshaun Elliott, Jamal Williams, Evan Brown. Okay pieces. Somewhat productive sometimes, but not ending the world. And then coming in a fair few guys here, especially in the cornerback position, with Cam Sutton coming in from the Steelers and Emmanuel Mosley coming over from the San Francisco 49ers, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson also coming over from the Eagles, as well as Marvin Jones coming back, Graham Glasgow for depth on the offensive line. A few big re-signings as well. John Kaminsky, the most noticeable. He had a terrific year last year. Ant, what do you make of the Lions off-season so far?
Well, as we've been saying all throughout, we're incredibly happy with what we've done this off season. We've had a rough 2 years, and we've had a rough 2 years because we were left in an absolute cesspit by Matt Patricia and his regime, and we've had to build, and we've had to build very painfully. We've not had, the one thing the Bears have had, we've not had in their rebuild is big sums of money. We've just not had any money to spend whatsoever. We've spent all our time paying people off, but what it means we've done. And what I think is the advantage we have to every other team in this division now is we have our young core built. We have it here, and we have it in depth. We've had 2 fantastic drafts. We've had it supplemented by a lot of, undrafted free agency winners as well. Jerry's in there. We've got the guys at tight, and we've just found it together. And now this has been the off season where we've finally been able to inject the good veteran talent into this team. The secondary has been atrocious for I can't remember how long, probably since Glover Quinn left. We've not had a good secondary since then. We've now gone out and we've got some really good guys in, and we're mixing them with a young group who have really been through the ringer, but they're the better for it now. I mean, we have a wonderful balance in there, and we have drafted well again, and just we seem to have improved everywhere. I know people have sort of knocked our draft a little bit based on the positional value thing. I don't know how the guys who are with us do their drafting, but to us who know this team, we drafted exactly what we needed. In Jahmyr Gibbs, we've got an offensive playmaker who's going to be one of the most dynamic rookies in the league this year. We've paired him with Monty. I love the pickup because Monty's going to be that veteran he gets 1,000 yards every season from scrimmage. Did it with the Bears. He's sure as hell going to do it with us, providing he stays healthy. You've got the perfect punch in the backfield there. We've got a quarterback who's someone knock. I don't care. He's great. He has shown so much improvement in his game these last sort of year and a half. I know the first half year was rough, but Jared Goff is a really good quarterback. We've got him going in. The offensive line set, it's fully healthy this year. Even the receivers, people might argue we don't have a wide receiver 1 in here. We don't need one. This offense doesn't require an out-and-out target. Sometimes it's better not to have one. Vikings are all about Jefferson a lot of the time, and it's just him. With us, when you don't have these guys who are outright, you can spread your targets all throughout the field. Defenses don't know what's coming. I think we're built really well. And the defenses, we've really gone for it this year. We've gone for the linebackers. We needed to. We've gone for the secondary. And the D-line, we just keep stacking up assets there. We've not had this for ages. Our edge depth is 7 deep with really good players. We have a ton of talent off the edge. In the interior, we're getting better. We've got one of our full-time starters there. We've got plenty of depth from last year. We saw Broderick's tape yesterday. He's going to be a star. We've gone about building this team the right way. And as far as the talent goes, there's not that many deficiencies on this team now. The big thing for us, the big problem is the mentality. Can we win when it matters? This team has not won when it mattered for many, many years. And I've argued on this podcast that last year was kind of, you're at 1-6, the pressure's off. You can kind of play a bit more freely. This year, you're going into a season where you're expected to win the NFC North. I expect us to win it, because Vikings, we beat last year. We should have beaten them in that first game. Don't get me wrong. The Vikings didn't win that first game. We lost it. That's plain and simple. And we beat them in the second one. The Bears, I know we got lucky with, but I still expect them to be...
Sorry there, Ant.
No.
You said the Vikings didn't win.
No, we lost it.
But what went in the columns, if you don't mind?
Points.
Did the Vikings get a W and the Lions get a big L?
They did, but it wasn't...
In that opinion, I would say that the Vikings won and the Lions did lose.
No, your quality did not win the game. Our stupidity lost us. Anyhow,
okay,
I digress.
You've elaborated now. That's fair enough.
I digress. Packers, we swear. It's can we do it when it matters? That's the big question about this team this year. We have got depth now, and we have got our star young players. And CJ is shaking his head. You are the biggest fraudulent team in this division, and you know it. So don't be giving us that. But yeah, that's as far as this team goes. We have got good depth. We have fixed the holes we need to. Can they win when it matters? Yeah. We'll see, because the start of our season is rough. It's really, really, really rough. And we've only won one game in the first 2 months of the last 2 seasons combined. So in the first 4 months of the last 2 seasons, we've won one game. Can't happen this year. Playing the Chiefs, the Seahawks, who battered us, the Panthers, who battered us, away at Green Bay, which is just not an easy place to go. That's all it's about this year. And we need to. If this regime wants to prove it's fully legit, we need to go out and win 3 or 4 of those and really take it by the scruff of the neck. But as for what we've done, I'm very happy. We don't have a defining weakness on this team now, as we always have. It's just, can we bring it all together?
I mean, I think you probably hit it on the head, full stop, there, and with obviously your opening 3, 4, possibly more games. I'm not too overly familiar with the Lions opening 6 games, if you will, but I know obviously we open our season to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think obviously as you're kind of touching on, ultimately it depends on those opening 3, 4, 5 games, obviously, to get a couple of wins under your belt, just to boost that start of the season confidence. And without that, obviously you're on a very, very slippery slope, because it's a case of it's just all doom and gloom, both with your fan base and in the locker room, and it's a hard thing to recover from.
Exactly. And the conference is a nightmare this year. I mean, we could all beat one another. We could all split, and that's fine. But then if you're 3-3 in the conference, you start losing a few of your early games, you're behind the 8 ball. You can soon be very much behind in this conference and out of it. Everybody's got a chance this year. So it is. I think the team who starts the best, I think the team with the best record after the first 5, 6 games out of our lots will win the conference, possibly. I don't know what your schedules are like, but for us, if we win 3 or 4 of that first 5, then none of y'all are catching us, with due respect.
I'll come on to division prospects and where we think the teams are going to rank in just a sec, but just to open up to CJ and Kieran. Maybe we'll come to CJ first and then end with Kieran, but just heard about our draft there and about potentially interesting picks in terms of positional value and the free agency, not a lot of losses, but a few big investments in the back end, which is where the problems were. What do you make of the Lions as a team, how they ended last year, where they're going now? Are you buying into the hype of the team? I'll come on to betting odds when we're talking about division prospects, but it does seem like they are big favourites. CJ.
I'm not. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to bait me in. You are trying to bait me in.
Oh, it's not like it takes much.
Think. No, but I'm trying to be kind to you guys this year.
Why?
Come on! The show's going to be a lot more fun for our viewers if you go for it.
Come on!
I'm not giving you guys the kiss of death. I'm picking a particular team in green and gold to win the division. I think they've got very, very good prospects. Have the green and gold in the NFC North. I think they're going to absolutely steamroll. I think we're all vastly underestimating what they can do. But obviously the Lions, I was taking the piss out of Anthony. I was taking the piss. I poked my fun plenty of times in the Discord. when you guys were having a meltdown moment, or one of those very, very close games, just obviously to stir the shit pot, because it makes my Sundays when I've got nothing better to do because we're on a 9:25 game or 1:20 start in the morning. It gives me something to watch. Obviously, like I say, I do enjoy watching the Lions games, and supporting along with you guys. So I did countless times. Obviously, I like to see the Lions do well, and you are. Unfortunately, and Kieran's going to go, oh, Jesus Christ, why he just come out with this now? You are one of the most entertaining teams to watch, undeniably. You are one of the most entertaining teams to watch with the new offensive regime of Dan Campbell and what he's doing with your squad. Obviously, it took a while to get you guys going, but he seems to have that locker room belief now, and the players are playing for him. And like Ant said, the quality involved in the two Vikings games, the Lions. I mean, I would argue a 1-on-1 split, Vikings and Lions, depending on obviously your own personal output of it. I would have said I was happy with a 1-1 split. Vikings Lions, obviously it could have gone with the swing, and Ant was probably very much correct in saying it probably should have been 2-0 to the Lions last season.
Right.
Undeniably. But it was, touching on the fact of there've been countless games last season for the Vikings where we did go, and win those very, very close one possession games. And unfortunately, the year before that, we were on the losing end of it. So it was nice to be on the positive side and not wanting to throw things at the TV. In disgust again for the fact that we've got beaten on a last-minute chip shot field goal, or we've shanked it wide left, or all the various different upsetting moments of Vikings recent histories where things have just not gone well for us. Even to the double doink when I was live watching it at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against the Saints, which was absolutely fantastic to be there live watching it happen. But obviously, I've been on the receiving end of something very, very similar, so I know how upsetting it is. Obviously, it's the Saints, so fuck them. And it was fantastic to watch. And the countless Saints fans in my block when I was there was not very happy with me, let's say, for my escapades for celebrations when I was there. But no, I honestly think the Lions have got a very, very good prospect. And obviously, if you continue on the trajectory that you finished last season with, could be a very, very, very interesting season for the Lions.
I think Kieran will agree. We can ban all talk about like last second field goals and stuff like that off this pod. I mean, I am all in favour of that, because if I see the Justin Tucker kick one more time, I'm going to cry. If I see the Bills kick one more time, I'm going to cry.
Yes. I had PTSD when you just said double doink.
Yeah, I was about to say.
but in fairness, CJ, when I did say earlier we should have beaten you in that second week, you go check my reaction. I was furious when we lost that game, because I
remember it very well.
That was when we went on the losing streak and went to 1-6, and we were behind the Bears at that point, who won 2, and I was absolutely fuming with how we lost that game. So I don't say it just out of spite or anything. It was, we should have won, and if we'd have had just like one good offensive possession in the last 15 minutes, would have won, and we couldn't muster one. Yeah. I was angry after that.
It was a rough game. Kieran, going to turn it over to you. What do you make of the Lions as a team now?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I agree with you. I think the expectation should be that the Lions should be the favourites to win the division, just purely based on how the season ended, right? Like when you go through that winning streak, you have all the positive vibes going into the next season. I think I have no idea what Minnesota is this year, because when you win so many of those close games, the probability is it's not going to happen again. Even if you lose half of those, then they come back to where the Lions were. And if the Lions improve, then you're looking at them as they have to be at least put on paper as the favourites to win the division. But the question becomes, what Lions do we see? Do we see the team that went 1-6? Because if you do that again, you likely don't win the division again. And that's the biggest problem. Part of it as well is the players are going to feel it. The coaches are going to feel it. There's an expectation to win the division. If you start off poorly, the fans will start getting on your back. And we know how that can happen for all these different teams when we've said that this division might be fairly close, because there's a lot of teams now that we don't really know what they're going to be. Like, we expect that the Packers are going to be bad because we don't know what Jordan Love is. We don't know how good the Minnesota Vikings are. I look at the Bears and I don't know how many games they're going to win because they have an improved team, but how long does it take for them to kind of gel together? The Lions are the team that you look at in this division and they should win it. But just because you should win it doesn't mean you do. And that's the biggest thing that I have. And I like what they've done for the most part in terms of improving the team. But it depends on what is the expectation. Is it solely to win the division? They have enough talent to win the division. I don't think they have enough talent to win many playoff games, though. And that's where there's still that improvement that I think, or maybe they need to prove it a little bit more this year, that they can go up against some of those teams and prove that they can be one of the contenders in the conference. I don't have that belief right now, but maybe some of those guys that they brought in mix well with what they had last year and it works. But that's where I think it just depends on where the expectation of the fans are. Like, as a Bears fan, like, I could be talking about my team on Twitter and then suddenly there's a bunch of Lions fans that are in there and they're like, we're going to win this, we're going to win that. And I'm like, okay, you're probably going to win the division, but how lofty are the expectations? And I think that can, if, like we said, if you start off poorly, because it's a tough start to the season for really a lot of our teams, that there's some tough games early on, that if the Lions do start poorly, what happens to those expectations? How heavy does that feel on the coaching staff and on the team? And that's one of those. I still expect them to win. I do. I think the Vikings are going to come back down to earth a little bit. I don't think they're going to win the 13 games or anything like that. I think the Lions have the best chance to win the division right now. And it's the reason why they're the favorites. Like, these bookies aren't stupid. They know what they're doing, right? I like overall in terms of the players they've brought in. I understand the whole point of positional value, all that sort of stuff. I like the draft picks. I don't like where they were taken purely just because I don't like drafting running backs in the first round. I don't care who they are. I said it even, I wouldn't have wanted the Bears to draft Bijan Robinson in the first round because I just don't like it. But I've said this, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a really good running back. I think David Montgomery is a really good running back. And I think that running back room is good. And I hate when I've seen it online. I hate when Bears fans say, Monty won't do this, Monty won't do that. Like, at the end of the day, we know what David Montgomery is. He'll bust his ass. He's not going to be an absolute superstar running back. He'll miss maybe 3 games, 4 games in a year because he does that every year. But he'll always do everything he possibly can for the team. And Lions fans will love him. And it would be any Bears fan that's out there saying anything negative towards David Montgomery, they're lying, because he's a really, really good player. In terms of the actual talent, in terms of what they brought in the draft, I like it. I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I like Jack Campbell. I like Sam Laporta. I like Branch. I think if you ignore where players were drafted and just what players were drafted, I don't think people can really slag off the Lions that much because they're good players. And I think when we go through a draft, people focus on where somebody was drafted. But I say, it's the day after the draft. Now it doesn't matter where they were drafted. Like, whether you were drafted in the 3rd round or the 1st round, if you prove that you should be a starter on your team, who gives a crap if you were drafted 105th or 2nd? Like, at the end of the day, it's if you can improve the team, that's all that matters. Now, I think the only criticism that I had with the Lions, and like I said, I like the players, I think there was a chance there to cement yourself as one of the favorites in the conference just purely because of the capital that was there. And I didn't agree with the kind of the moving back and stuff, because I thought that there was plenty of really good players there. But they made that decision. They decided that they needed to go and get that number 1 running back. They needed to get a linebacker that they really wanted. And look, you guys shouldn't care if those guys perform in their rookie year. Who gives a crap if they picked a running back in year or at 12? who gives a crap if they took Jack Campbell, who, like these draft analysts said, should be like 30 something, because it doesn't matter. They perform well, that's all that matters. And I think the players are good. I think that what they were doing, Lions fans should be happy with what they were able to accomplish this offseason. But I also think a lot of this is going to come down to, where are those expectations? Are the expectations just purely win the division and that's a good season? Or should the expectation is that you need to compete for in the conference? And I guess I'll leave that up to you. Where do you guys think the expectation should be for this Lions team?
So for me, just to kind of round this all off, if we win the division, I will be content with the season. But it's meeting the most basic expectations. Like, I think not getting that makes it a hugely disappointing season. My aim is to be the number 3 seed at least. I want us to beat the winners of probably the NFC South for that 3rd seed, because if you come 4th seed, you are facing the second best team in the East. And that's the Eagles or it's the Cowboys. Whichever one of those wins the division, the 4th seed plays them at home. And that's a really scary prospect. Even though you're at home, the worst division winner is going to struggle against a team of that caliber. So getting the number 3 seed is an absolute must. Now, I don't think anyone in the South is anyone to worry about, but someone's got to win it. And what if they win it with 10 or 11 wins and the Lions win the division with 9 or 10 and you lose out on a tiebreaker or something like that? I mean, I can see it happening, and then suddenly the Cowboys come into Ford Field, and I bet every Lions fan will be shitting their pants, because we know what happens when we play the Cowboys in a playoff game. It's just horrific. So that's my actual expectation for the season, is to get the 3 seed. I don't think we'll overhaul San Francisco, and I don't think we'll overhaul the Eagles, who I picked to win the East. I just think top 2 are probably impenetrable, just because they're such good teams. But we'll see. I really love what the Lions have done, because it may not have been the smartest picks, you're right, but if you have a look at why they picked the players they did and who they are, the smart pick at 12 for the Lions might have been a player we're about to talk about with the Packers, which is Lucas Van Ness. And it's like, hang on a minute though, but that guy he's got a really high ceiling, but he's a project. The Lions want to win right now. And, we might be sacrificing some hypothetical future value. But what's the chance that Lucas Van Ness busts? Like, his ceiling's really high, but his floor's super low as well. So we've taken players that have actually all got super high floors, and then they have some ceiling to boot as well. And that's where I really love our class, is that in the worst the class can be is pretty good. And that's a really nice place to be. So if we can take our end of season form, which I believe is more representative of who we are as a team, I can only see us going one way. And if it does start poorly, we've been there. We've hauled ourselves out of 1-6 with a worse team than this. Some of those players have carried over. The majority of the players of the team are the players that turned that around. Now there was less pressure. But if we start 1-3, can they haul themselves out of it? Well, it's shown they could. So I got full expectation that they can turn that sort of thing around. So when it comes to losing, they've turned it around. They've kept a lot of the players that already have the good chemistry. They've supplemented it with a limited number of players who have to fit into that culture and become their own man, but within this sort of really uplifting environment that's brutally honest too. But I'm just a big, big believer in what they've done and where they're going. So that's where I'm at. But we'll talk about division prospects in a minute. And I'm going to do, because I'm the 4th member of this, I'm going to try and do my best to present to you the Green Bay Packers. So, God help me, this is a one-time thing. Obviously, the Packers off-season has been just absolutely ruined by the ongoing saga of the Aaron Rodgers story. And I'd just like to give you all an opportunity to say goodbye to Aaron Rodgers. If you have anything you want to say.
Don't throw one to Kirby on your way out.
Come on, I know you got something to see, CJ.
I'm holding it.
Kieran, any final words for Aaron Rodgers?
No.
Oh, you're too kind. Too kind.
How fruitful
you
can
mustache
it be?
ayahuasca prick. Right. So Rodgers dealt along with pick 15 overall and 170 to the Jets for number 13. So they went up 2 spots. They also got a second round pick, which was number 42, and a sixth, which is 207. A conditional 2024 second that becomes a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the games this season. So God forbid he gets injured. What a shame that would be for everyone. They then ended up drafting basically everyone in the draft this year. They got Lucas Van Ness, as I mentioned, Luke Musgrave, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Colby Wooden, Sean Clifford, Dontavian Wicks, Carl Brooks, Anders Carlson, Carrington Valentine, Lou Nichols III, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Grant DuBose, if that wasn't enough players. But in free agency, they were hamstrung by that Rodgers deal and they really couldn't invest in very much at all. They brought in a grand total of 3 players and none of them were paid above $1.3 million average per year. They did manage to re-sign Keyshawn Nixon, their star returner, but otherwise they lost, as we heard earlier, Bob Tonyan, as well as Dean Lowry, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Adrian Amos, Mason Crosby moved on, Mercedes Lewis. They've lost a fair amount of players that were productive for them. And then, you have a look at that as a whole. I'm going to try and be positive about the Packers because this is kind of what this member of this cast would do. I'm going to try and find it difficult, though. Jordan Love, he did really well in that one game, right? Surely he can be the answer at quarterback. And then you have a look at this team. The one thing I will say about this, and I mean this genuinely, I do think Aaron Rodgers held them back last year as a quarterback. He was still okay, but he was clearly injured with that hand, and the chemistry just kind of wasn't there with his guys for whatever reason. But Christian Watson had a breakout year last year as a wide receiver, started slow, but he had one of the best months a wide receivers had in the National Football League. I think he had like 10 touchdowns in a month or something. It was ridiculous. And they Romeo Dobbs, they've supplemented that with Jaden Green. It's probably the youngest starting trio of wide receivers in the NFL. And then they've supplemented that with 2 new tight ends as well in Musgrave and Kraft. But the best part of that team last year was the running attack. And yet they tried to shoehorn Rodgers into throwing the ball, which was a really it detracted from what they were good at. They've still got Aaron Jones. They've still got AJ Dillon. And they've got one of the best offensive lines in the division still in Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, John Runyon, and Josh Neiman. And then they got Zach Tom on the bench, who me and Ant were talking about yesterday, that we're fans of. He's a really good player. Royce Newman's back there as well as a backup offensive lineman. So offensive line and running backs are still really strong. Love coming in is going to make them a more balanced offense. That's actually going to play into their strengths. And then on defense, it underperformed last year. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But apart from losing Adrian Amos, they're returning pretty much the same team. In Devontae Wyatt, they've got someone who really should come on strong this year. I'm a believer that he's going to be a really good player. Kenny Clark, still excellent. Preston Smith is a wrecker when he wants to be. Devondre Campbell obviously got that massive deal on the back of a terrific year. They're going to have Rashawn Gary back fit, and he's one of the best edges in the National Football League. And then you got Jair Alexander, possibly cornerback 1 in the National Football League. Darnell Savage might have a bounce back year. Maybe the other cornerback is a work in progress. We know Eric Stokes can be a bit of a liability at times, but he's still one of the fastest players at that position. And, I mean, they've got a new kicker. I mean, whatever. But on paper, if that offense becomes more balanced and it maybe is a bit more efficient and that defense just regresses back to where it really should be, which is a damn good one, this Packers team can't be swept on. As much as I hate to say it, boys, trying to have this with my Packers hat on, which has been in the closet for, since I've been born, and I'm taking it off again now. But the Packers are not as bad as we want to say, right?
Packers are going to win enough, 100%.
Can we start talking truth now? Now that we've done we've done that glorified paint job, can we start ripping them to bits? I just want to say their draft was the worst of our entire division. It was absolutely
awful.
You said how we went for sort of high floor players with quite good ceilings as well. They just went for players who have a ceiling like the Sistine Chapel, but then a floor which goes all the way down to hell itself. Those first 2 guys, Musgrave has been injured most of his career and has done nothing. And then you've got Van Ness, who was one of the biggest frauds in the draft. I mean, that's why we didn't go after these D-line guys at the top. There were just so many fraudulent players. And then you look down, another 3 receivers this year. That's 6. They've picked in the last 2 drafts. They're just throwing darts here, there, and everywhere. And some of their better picks were later on. I love Carl Brooks, and I hate that he's gone to Green Bay there. But, I mean, outside of that, they drafted Jaden Reed 100 spots too high. You probably should have put Kraft there, and then it's just a load of nobodies. And then they picked Sean Clifford, who's like a 30-year-old rookie. So it's like, there's a quarterback. It was an awful draft. They've not got better, not through the draft. And I know they've got guys coming back from injury, but we saw the fallibility of this team last year. You know, when it doesn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback playing there, that defense is really put under pressure. It's fallible. And yes, the offensive line is good, but Bakhtiari's screwed. His knee's going to give. He's not going to play a full season again. And when he's out, it's a lot more vulnerable. I mean, we dominated them. Last day of the season when they had the playoffs to play for, and we absolutely whacked them in the trenches. And, you know, we'd suffered injuries by this point, and, you know, we weren't fully healthy. This Packers team is regressing, and there's a lot of people, a lot of teams who are going to vent a lot of frustration built up over many years on this side. I know the Bears will love this regression here. They'll love to give some payback there. And, you know, the Packers are not building well through the draft. They're getting old. There's not many replacements coming through. I think they're on their way down, and I think we'll see it as quick as this year.
Week 1 can't come quick enough. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. Like, I completely agree, because when we were talking about the draft for so long, and when the Bears moved down, I was like, just don't draft Lucas Van Ness. He was the one player around that area I did not want, and I was delighted when he went to the Packers. And yeah, look, there's definitely a scenario where you can say they still have a lot of the players that made them successful. But at the end of the day, like, it's all going to come back to Jordan Love. If he's below average to average, that team's not going to win many games. And that's just the way it is. Like, when you have to look at Packers fans hyping up incompletions, that's what the Bears fans did for Mitchell Trubisky. Like, we know exactly how that feels. And the fact that I see them, like, the wild takes that have come out from kind of Packers Twitter it's very, very amusing this offseason, because normally it's not based on that. The fact that I see them saying, oh, Jordan Love is kind of at some level better than the amount of quarterbacks in the league. I'm like, you've not even seen him playing a proper football game to even make any sort of analysis that he is going to be a productive or good quarterback in this league. And the fact that, when you mentioned it, that Aaron Rodgers wasn't great last year because he was injured. The fact that they had an opportunity to go to the playoffs, he was injured. He was holding them back. And Packers fans say that as well, that he held them back. Well, if that's the case, if you truly believed in Jordan Love, you would have played him. Like, if you thought that he was going to be a good quarterback, you would have played him. When you have your coach, you have the left tackle and David Bakhtiari saying for fans to, like, calm down a little bit about this guy and give him some time. They are pretty much telling you what they think as well. So yeah, like, I think that I don't think they're going to be terrible. And I actually don't want them to be terrible, because I don't want them to be in a position to get the answer at quarterback. So I'm fine with them winning a couple of games. That's all good, as long as they don't get in a position to get one of these guys in this upcoming draft. But it's wild. I see some of the fans saying that, like, Christian Watson is like an all-pro level wide receiver. And again, it's where I say there's going to be a fan base that's going to be extremely disappointed with this season, and I do think it's going to be the Packers fans, because they've hyped up their team so much because they think it's just going to continue on from Rodgers to Love. And a lot of these people have never seen their team with a bad quarterback, and I'm here for it. I can't wait.
I mean, he's not thrown a pass since 2019 in a competitive game. I mean, take Rodgers out there.
Yeah, he has. He threw a game in week 17 this year. I've got his stats up right here.
I said not competitive. Not competitive.
Oh, I see. Right, he came in relief, you mean, at the end of the games.
He's not thrown a competitive pass since 2019. I mean, take Aaron Rodgers out of the equation. How many quarterbacks have to wait till year 4 to throw their first competitive throw and then go on to be good? There are not many who wait that. I said put him aside. And he saw game time before that. He was in year 3.
The whole contract thing that they did this year, they were both hedging their bets. If you believe in yourself as Jordan Love, you don't sign that contract. If you're the Packers and you truly believe in Jordan Love, you want him to prove it to you that you can then give him a contract extension. They basically both have gone in saying that, oh, this might work, but it might not. And, like, if you're the agent of Jordan Love and and you're the player and you truly believe in yourself, there's no way in hell you sign that deal, because you get a chance. If you think that the team's going to be good and you're the quarterback, why would you do that to yourself? Because you could have gone in with a big payday. And that's where I think you kind of just have to look at the writing on the wall. You listen to the people that are in that building. You just look at what happened in terms of that contract. Like, I don't think there's a lot of optimism other than just within their fan base, because at the end of it, you mentioned it, right? Like, there's no data there to show that he's going to be really, really good. He's essentially a rookie coming in. And we always say rookies in their first year, even if they look good, they don't win many football games. And that's what you look at with Jordan Love. He may look decent, but that doesn't mean the Packers are going to win many games, because looking decent, he can still lose you games. And that's where they're in a position where, like I said, I hope they win a couple of games, because then they're in that position of, well, do we believe in them? Do we not? And then they get stuck in the middle. And that's where, if you're a fan of the Vikings, if you're a fan of the Bears, if you're a fan of the Lions, that's where you want the Packers. Yeah. Like, you don't want them winning 2 games and getting Caleb Williams. Oh. Like, that's not what you want to see. You want to see them win like 5 or 6 games, end up with like the 11th pick and not get a chance of getting a quarterback. That's what you want. And you want them to have to force being with Jordan Love for the next 2 years, and the next guy that they bring in still isn't good enough for them to get to that next level. That's the ideal scenario.
CJ. Jordan Love is the equivalent of Scott Carson now. I'm a City fan. I love Scott Carson. I think he's legendary when you come to soccer. But Jordan Love strikes me as one of those types of Scott Carson-esque players. You know, he just rides the bench and he ends up with silverware at the end of it, but he's done next to sod all to actually win it himself. Will he win some at the Packers? Probably not. He'll be a backup quarterback by the end of year 6, I think, in the league, because he's not going to have the stats and, you know, the film tape to effectively get him another full-time deal, in my personal opinion, following off with what Kieran said. You know, he's very, very similar to Kellen Mond that the Vikings acquired. You know, there was a time, I think the last season of Mike Zimmer, where a lot of Vikings fans were calling for Cousins' head, going, he needs to be on the bench, bring in Kellen Mond. Kellen Mond is the man. I'll just ask around the room now, where's Kellen Mond?
Out of the league?
I couldn't honestly tell you, but I know he's not on the Vikings squad anymore.
Kirk's probably employed him to clean his room of gold for all his fraudulently big contracts he's been given by the Vikings.
He's a backup with the Cleveland Browns.
There we go.
Yeah, that's even more embarrassing.
Yes. But I mean, you know, Vikings fans are going, oh, drop Kirk Cousins and we'll play Kellen Mond. And, you know, getting back to what Kieran said, if Kellen Mond was worth his salt, if Jordan Love was worth his salt when it comes to the Packers, when things start going wrong, you'd bring him in if he was worth it. You don't stick a player that is better than the one that you've currently got on the bench. I mean, you know, getting very, very, very to the front and fore of this entire chat tonight, chaps. You know, we were talking about being one of the best 3 quarterbacks in the league and such like that. When you actually put it out there, there's 32 very, very good quarterbacks in the league.
I mean, in the conference, I meant earlier.
Yes.
In the NFC
North.
North.
I mean, ultimately, though, there is 32 very, very good quarterbacks. And then, let's say, easily double, possibly treble that number for in the league as a whole. But they're not quite the elite level. But obviously, I know that you've got the elite of the elite. But when you think of how small the number is to be a professional quarterback in the league, that number is a very, very small number. And I've never seen any 3 of you chaps play American football. Don't know if you've got the capabilities to play American football. Let's take it, you know, you could roll back 2 or 3 foot, Anthony, be there in a wheelchair. You don't look it, mate. I don't think you are in a wheelchair, but you could very well be and throw me a complete curveball. If you could play American football in a wheelchair, fair play to you. But
it's happening.
I'm getting back to where I'm going now. You know, Kieran was mentioning about I've forgotten the name of the Packers wide receiver, Christian Watson.
Yeah.
Christian Watson being all pro in the Packers sort of league. Let's face it, if you were getting the ball thrown to you 95% of the time on all targets that get thrown, you could be an all pro wide receiver.
Oh, I'm not buying it.
Granted, you've got to come down with the ball more often than not, but it does help when you get the targets to stand out.
Okay, sure, but the guy's like a Browse score of nearly 10. He's freakishly tall, freakishly fast, and the only thing he had to really do is get his route running and catching together. I remember week 1, he dropped an absolute sitter for a 75-yard score, maybe first, second play of the year, and Rodgers really didn't want to go back to him for the first half of the season. But I can't remember exactly how many it was because I haven't checked, but he got 10 touchdowns in 4 games.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was against the Vikings.
Yeah, I think it was. but he scored 10 touchdowns in 4 games or something, kind of down the stretch. I'm not saying the guy was all-pro. He had an all-pro caliber month of the season, but it proves it's in his locker, and it's not like you're getting Laviska Shenault doing that. And I'm pretty sure he's better than me at football. So I see what you're saying, but it's a bit glib, I think, because Christian Watson's a damn good player. The problem is, can Jordan Love elevate his play? Probably not. I will say on his contracts, though, I'm a big fan. If I was a Packers fan and a Jordan Love fan, I am a big fan of that contract. And it may be completely different to you guys and very different to you, Kieran. I don't know what the two of you think about it, but you were saying if you believe in yourself, you don't take that deal. And from the Packers side, you're saying if you believe in him, you probably offer him more. You're getting away with murder there. But if I'm the agent of Jordan Love, I'm saying to you, Jordan, I believe in you, mate. I really think that you can do it. But what you need to do is not put your roster spot in jeopardy by making it a sort of cliff edge position. You're buying yourself time with this to say, I am the entrenched starter of this team. They're going to run with you for 17 games, and then you can get paid. But you've got to perform in this one season. It's a prove-it year for you. But what you are doing is after that first contract, you've gone and said, actually, you know what? If it doesn't work out, you can retire. You are getting stability for you and your family. You've provided yourself the comfort of security for the rest of your life, and all you've traded in is 1 year of a contract. 1 year. And then you can go and get paid the absolute world if you have a really good year. And the thing is, 1 year in football is really not that long. And, it kind of sucks if he believes in himself, he feels like he should get paid the world. But actually, he needs the opportunity to do that, and he hasn't had it. And even the most realistic Packers fan and Jordan Love fan has got to realise after 3 years, he might have to knock off a little bit of rust. So I think from a Jordan Love perspective, it makes total sense for him, this deal.
I disagree.
No agent in history has ever said to his client, think of yourself in the long, just take this amount of money here and you're set for life. No agent in the history of the world has said that. They don't believe in him.
But they were never offering him more money, and the agent has put more money on the agent's own table by signing the deal. So it was in the agent's interest as well.
Yeah, but Jordan Love can go out and play like an all-pro next year and then go, you know what, I actually don't want to stay with you Packers. I'll go get paid elsewhere. Or
so it's a great deal then?
Money. No, it's not.
No,
it really is not. They've shown that they don't trust him. Yeah. And that is when it all gets broken down. And he's going to remember that. He's going to have been sat on the bench going, well, Aaron's clearly not playing well. It's year 3. He ain't. It's like some freshman rookie in the NFL. He's been in longer than Justin Fields has, than a lot of these other guys. And he's still not seen the field. And when that trust's broken, it's gone. It's like CJ mentioned Kellen Mond, but I mean, Zimmer sold him out. All those comments he made in public about Kellen Mond, which was so disrespectful to him. And then it's like, you've lost him then. He's not going to play for you. Even if he's not great, he's still not going to try and play for you. They've done the same with Love.
Yeah.
They've broken bridges with him now. You don't ever sit a quarterback for 4 years if you think he's good and you trust him to be good. You trade Rodgers when his value's at its highest, and then you move on to your next guy, which was supposedly the thing with him. It was, they should have loved the fact that Aaron went back-to-back MVP after the draft and like, right, let's go get a first-round pick for him, and then let's put Jordan in, and we can get first-round pick, give him a weapon, something like that. There's nothing to this contract being signed. There's nothing to it.
All right, okay, fair enough.
I just echo what Kieran said in regards to Love's contract and Love's performance this year. I just hope he's that middle ground sort of quarterback, which just gives the Packers something to think about. If it's an absolute shit show and a horror show when it comes to Green Bay, as much as I would very much enjoy that, it makes the decision very, very easy for the green and gold.
All right.
If
Sorry.
The other flip side of that coin, if he turns up with no rust on him whatsoever and puts one of those stellar seasons, it makes the Packers again make that decision of paying him quite handsomely for what he's got. But the middle ground, 7-8 games, just not enough to win the division, but good enough to improve on. It makes the Packers decide in the draft what they want to do accordingly at quarterback if they don't want to go with the Jordan Love project for another couple of years.
Right, let's get on to a subject that CJ is very familiar with, which is the off-season of the Minnesota Vikings. Draftees were Jordan Addison, Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward, Jacqueline Roy, Jaron Hall, and Dwayne McBride. In free agency, it was another active one for you guys. Pazzy P moved on. Also lost Duke Shelley, Eric Kendricks, Dalvin Tomlinson, Irv Smith, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. I know you said who in the chat about Dalvin Cook, but I don't believe you. And otherwise bringing in, I would say Byron Murphy coming into a big get for you guys considering Peterson's moved on. Re-signed Garrett Bradbury, also brought in Marcus Davenport, re-signed Alexander Mattison. Quite a lot of re-signings in here actually. Greg Joseph, Ollie Odo, Nick Mullins, Jonathan Bullard. Who else did we sign in here? Brandon Powell, Troy Reader. So it seems like you guys have made a signing or two, which is going to make a difference. Josh Oliver, Byron Murphy specifically, but lost quite a lot too. Patrick Peterson being the big one, Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. There's a lot going out, and there's not a huge amount of draft picks, but personally, big fan of Jordan Addison, but it was the only pick you had in the top 100, so that kind of hindered you guys a bit. What do you make of the team? Obviously, 13-4 last year with this offseason. What's your expectations? Where are you at?
It's very much going back to what Anthony said. It's very, very difficult to kind of put down what I honestly think into words as to the Vikings' performance in the upcoming season, because like it's been said countless times, and unfortunately, whilst I don't believe the statement / moniker that we kind of got given over the last 18 months, if you will, going back to the draft of last year, and the back end, so to speak, with the fraudulent Vikings winning 13-3. Because whilst obviously we did win some of those very, very close games, at the end of the day we had to be in the games to win them. Fortunately for us, unfortunately for the teams on the other side, we were the fortunate ones that ended up winning. But that's the way that the football games sort of fall, and it can happen to anyone on any given Sunday. I do think the Vikings are due to crash back down to earth. Just looking at our opening first 5 weeks, and obviously I'm hoping that the game that I'm attending on the 24th of September at US Bank Stadium for the Chargers is a win. Then again, obviously we're visiting, and we'll be getting visited by Eric Kendricks. But opening it up, we've got the Buccaneers, we've got the Eagles, Vikings and Chargers, Panthers, and the Chiefs in our opening 5 games. So realistic Viking fan in me is saying 1-4 at a push. The one game that we're winning is most likely going to be for the Carolina game. I'm probably pushing it out to 2-3 if we manage to take the Chargers. But the other 3 games in the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Buccaneers, I'm very much not expecting.
Surely you could beat the Bucks. Come on, don't do yourself like that. The Bucks are trash.
It's one of those.
They're shooing for the number 1 pick. The Bucks.
Sorry, I thought you were saying the Vikings. Then I was.
No, I mean the Buccaneers are shooing for the number 1 pick. Sorry, CJ, carry on.
Right, I don't know. We're very much one of those sort of teams. I don't know what we're expecting. There's not been a great deal of footage that I've seen coming out of any training camps, OTAs, that have really kind of jumped out like recent years, so to speak. So I don't really know what we're kind of looking at and working with. Like you say, Jordan Addison has been picked up to obviously try and replace Adam Thielen, which I think is about time, so to speak. As sad as I am to see Adam Thielen go, it's undeniable that he's lost a step and he's not managing to get the separation quite the same as he was in the big sort of era of Minnesota Vikings. But obviously that would come with age, as with Patrick Peterson, Eric Kendricks. They're certainly on like a regressive path, if you will. So it's probably the right time for the Vikings to move on from those sort of players. Again, sad to see them go. They were a core of the team for a vast period of time. So obviously, it's not something that you're proud to do. It's not something that you're happy about doing, is blowing up those core of players, if you will, in the team. But obviously everything must come to an end, and the NFL does stand for the not for long league, so to speak. And unfortunately, some of the fan favourites, if you will, have had to find pastures new. Dalvin Cook, obviously, people have turned around and said that I don't think we've understood quite how much of an impact Dalvin Cook is probably going to play a part this season when it comes to it. But again, Dalvin Cook to me is one of those which is, it's a 50-50 sort of decision. I can understand why he's not worth, in my opinion, the money that he's commanding. Because whilst obviously he can break through the gaps, break through the line, break around the edge, and obviously turn on the afterburners and leave 95% of the defenders in the league in the dust, he's also got the capability of kind of stuttering too much, getting through the line, rather than just, what you would expect of like a power back and elusive back, for example, all the various archetypes of running back, so to speak. He doesn't just seem to put his head down, breach through that offensive line, get round the edge, and just go. Sometimes he seems to dance too long, kind of bides his time. He's not, unfortunately, in my opinion, slippery enough to be able to dance around, break those tackles that actually do come down the line and make the yards. When he does it and it works well, fantastic. But unfortunately, in latter seasons, that seemed to be few and far between, as opposed to the likes of Adrian Peterson in his MVP season, who the minute he got the ball in his hand and he got past that offensive line and broke the line of scrimmage, chances are he was gone.
I'm kind of glad in a way that you said this, because for me, the Vikings, what they are is they are an aging team who have missed their window, and they've now got to reset. And there's a lot of problems that are going to come now because, I mean, you look at the draft in particular, and I do actually like the draft. There's a lot of good players in there, but it's like Addison. I called that from miles away. I got it on our pre-draft picks. But what is Addison doing? He's replacing Thielen. Then you look at Blackman and Ward. It's like the billionth attempt to try and get cornerbacks in there. They've tried and whiffed on so many cornerbacks. You're replacing, Jacqueline Roy comes in. He's replacing Dalvin Tomlinson. You're not adding to your team. You're replacing, and that's a team who's going through transition. They've gotten younger now at a lot of positions, but they've not gotten better immediately. This is going to be a long-term process for them. And the big problem they have now is Kirk. This is his last year. So are you going to be trying to be competitive this year? But if you are, you're not going to pay Kirk again next year. He's going to want $50 million. And as funny as that would be if they tried to do that at his age, it's just not tenable if you're trying to build a new team for the future. But if you're trying to compete, you ain't going to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. So there's a massive quarterback quandary there now. They've kind of put themselves into a corner. Jaron Hall, I like him, but he ain't a franchise guy. He's going to be a good solid backup in the league if you're going to go there. He could come in and win you a game in time, but this is the changing of the guard now. And I think, honestly, the best thing for the Vikings would be to have an awful season. And I say that with the respect that they can go out and solve their quarterback situation and carry on building a better, younger team, because now you are just hanging on with a lot of older players. Like I say, some have gone, but some are still there. It just feels like now is the time to hit the hard reset rather than pretend it's still fine, because there is a problem with it. But like I say, overall, I like the picks on that, but you're going through a process now, and I think you have to go all in on it.
I couldn't agree anymore, to be honest. And it is very much one of those. I think we missed the window, the year of obviously the Minneapolis Miracle. The fact of how we managed to do what we did in that particular game and then play so flat against Philadelphia the following week. That was upsetting to say the least. It honestly felt like it was our year, undeniably after the Minneapolis Miracle. But then looking back on it, that was kind of our Super Bowl. Just quite how that finished. And I do agree with you. I think obviously a lot of the windows of a lot of the players in the Vikings have either come and gone or are in the process of passing. Like you say, it's a very much difficult one to kind of call as a Vikings fan, because I agree with both sentiments, so to speak, that you came out with. We need to either go complete win now, but obviously we've lost a lot of those veteran players who can bring, the been there, seen it, done it sort of mentality of getting to the postseason and winning postseason games. Kirk, he's not obviously one of those that is very, very familiar with winning postseason games. Like they could be present on other teams, but he's one of the ones that has seen a postseason game, considering obviously the amount of veterans that are available now to actually kind of talk about it. But, the interesting one for me is not so much looking at Kirk Cousins as to what the Vikings are going to do with Kirk Cousins. I mean, ultimately, I think 95% of everybody who knows anything about sports, not alone like just American football, so to speak, will kind of understand that Justin Jefferson will be getting paid. I wholeheartedly, will more than likely cry if we don't pay Justin Jefferson, because what a loss that would be to our team. But at the same time, if the Vikings don't pay Justin Jefferson, mainly for the reason being he is effectively our new franchise guy, is Justin Jefferson. We need to build the team around Justin Jefferson. But at the same time, I don't want the Vikings to make Justin Jefferson's window of winning and being that champion that he deserves to be dwindle out like the countless players in the league that have seen the same happen to them, on the hope that, it could happen. Not so much kind of to kind of throw salt in the wounds, Matt and Ant, but Matthew Stafford, for example. I was so happy that he managed to achieve it. Unfortunately, he didn't do it with you guys, and he had to go to pastures new with LA to a sunnier climb to obviously win the Super Bowl. But, how upset would it have been, considering Matthew Stafford's career, for him not to win one?
Yeah, fair.
It was the right thing.
It's funny that you invoke a Detroit Lions player, because I was actually going to say, if you do end up paying what you might pay for Jefferson, I fear that it could be another Megatron-style career. Hall of Famer, one of the best of all time, didn't win a thing. Like, Jefferson's going to get 35 mil plus a year? Maybe more. Maybe more. And that's like, he could get 4 years, 160 million or something. And it's like, how can you win with that year one? Like, you're going to be stuck, and you've got to pay. And there was a question in the chat. Are you paying TJ Hawkinson as well? Because you've got to pay him this offseason too. Like, probably, with the amount you traded for him, you probably still have to pay him. But how? I don't get it. But anyway, I'm going to turn over to Kieran just to have a word here too. What do you make of the Vikings offseason?
Yeah, actually looking through what they did, I don't think you have to worry about them not paying Justin Jefferson. They're going to pay Justin Jefferson. The question for me is, do they trade Danielle Hunter before the season starts? Because obviously he's one that wants a new contract. If you're planning on giving Justin Jefferson a big deal, he could be one that actually goes, and that kind of signals maybe it is going to be one of those down years, and maybe it is better that you bottom out. Like, if you're looking at it as a Vikings fan, knowing that Kirk Cousins likely won't be there next year if they're not going to pay him a ridiculous amount of money, and you do pay Justin Jefferson, well, then you're setting the next quarterback up for success, because you would have your number one receiver already. But to be able to do that, you need a bad year. And the thing is, there is scope for that happening for the Vikings. When when you look at it, there are always teams that have won the division one year and then they completely bottom out the next year. And the Vikings, I think, are in that transition where it seems like they actually need to do that. But I actually said it last year that they probably should have tried to start doing it then rather than waiting a year and kind of having that false dawn and knowing you're not going to win anything of substance after the division. Because now you're kind of on the back burner a little bit, that if you win the 6, 7, 8, 9 games, you're stuck. Because then you probably have to pay Kirk Cousins because you're not going to get somebody in that's going to be better. And that's where it struggles. Like, where I disagree is I actually don't like what the Vikings did in the draft. I thought they had the worst draft of the teams in the NFC North. I didn't like Jordan Addison as one of the top receivers, and I don't think they did anything else to improve that team. I don't like Matthew Blackman as a starting level corner. I think Jay Ward that they brought in is likely a backup nickel, maybe might be a hybrid safety. I wasn't a fan of what they did, and I don't think they improved enough. And they're the team that I think probably has, where if they have if their fans think they're going to win the division, I think they're going to be very, very disappointed with what they see, because I don't think that they are good enough this year. Just looking on paper, even, I don't think they're good enough to genuinely compete. Now, saying that, they still have the X factor of Justin Jefferson, and he can win you a game, and that's where there is the difference. But the problem is, if they suffer any amount of injuries, or if Justin Jefferson goes down, that team probably becomes the worst in the division. And that's where I would be worried as a Vikings fan, because you're at a point in time where if you do suck this year, you can quickly turn it around because you have players that are really, really good. Like we've mentioned Jefferson, there's some really good players on kind of the D-line and the offensive line where you can see it getting turned around. But the problem is, if you do middle out and you then don't have an answer at the quarterback next year, that's where you worry of where do they go, right? Like, it's the whole, you mentioned it, Megatron and Stafford. Like, Stafford was good enough to win you games. Calvin Johnson was an unbelievable receiver, but when the rest of the team isn't good enough to get you over the hump, it doesn't matter. And that's where I see the Vikings right now. I don't think they improved at all this offseason. I think they're pretty much the same in terms of the players that were there, but they've suffered losses to guys that were experienced in that team. And will that mean that they're going to be the ones coming back down to earth? And we were saying it before that they won so many of these close games. If you lose half of those, like, that's where you talk about one year having a really good season to middling out. And that's actually the worst place that the Vikings can be next year. If they do win like 7 games next year, you ain't getting a quarterback. So then you probably have to pay Kirk Cousins money that everybody's going to laugh at because because of his age and the amount of money they've already invested in him. But you kind of are, for someone that would be a Vikings fan, it's got to be a little bit deflating, because you look at a Lions team that's young, that's improving. You could look at, if the Bears improve this year, where Fields takes the next step and those players link in together, you can be like, they're improving. The Packers do have a young team. Like, I don't believe in Jordan Love, but if he's even average at best, you can actually look at them and be like, well, they're young, they could be improving, they can compete, and those 3 teams are. While as a Vikings fan, you could be like, we're getting older. While we have Justin Jefferson, we have some other guys that are very good players. It's a team sport for a reason. Obviously you need the quarterback. If you don't have the quarterback, it doesn't matter. But where I'd be worried is, I don't know how the Vikings genuinely compete in the conference in general. Like, if that's their goal, to try and win the division, even if they won the division and they won the same amount of close games, I have no faith in them winning a playoff game. And I think that's the problem. They need to pick a direction. And right now, for me, I think the Vikings are stuck in the middle where they don't know what direction. Are they going to try and win it all, or are they trying to do a rebuild? Because doing a rebuild on the fly never works. You have to either commit to it, or you have to invest in the team and hope you go and win the division. And for me, I just think the Vikings haven't made that decision. And it's a tough one to make when you do have guys like Justin Jefferson, but it's one that these GMs get paid to do, and he's got to make a decision now on what direction he wants to go.
Right. We've talked about all of the teams individually. I'm just going to go across the room to each person repping each team, and I'm going to ask for a best case scenario, your expectation and your worst fears realised for next season. Assuming, I'll put this stipulation in, quarterback remains healthy for the entire year, because if that doesn't, it ruins the prediction. There's no point in making it. So, quarterback healthy year, best case expectation, your worst case scenario. I'm going to go in alphabetical order again. So, Kieran, I'm going to start with you. Bears, best case scenario, mid and worst case scenario.
All right, best case scenario is development happens on the offense. It clicks, the new players come in, and they compete with the Lions for the division. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be the best case scenario, I think, because I want it to be a natural development, so then you can kind of see that happening. The middle part is where my realistic brain comes in, and I think that there's development in the Bears win 7 or 8 games this year, where you feel good about it. And to add into the best case scenario actually is that every team in the division beats the Carolina Panthers. That's the other one. And then, I think the worst case scenario is there continues to be question marks around Justin Fields, and the Packers are good. That's my worst case scenario.
And for the Lions, best case, mid case, worst case.
So the best case scenario, I think, double-digit wins. Obviously, we win the conference. We get a favourable home
division.
Tie,
Just say division.
Yeah,
NFC.
Division. Sorry, I still think in terms over here. So
college football.
Yeah. So we win the NFC North, favourable home game, get a win in the playoffs. Don't know how far, but I want to start knocking these dominoes down that we get knocked with. It's the NFC first to win. That's the best case scenario. That's kind of where I want us to be at. I'm not so fussed if we win a postseason game, but I want to win it. Mid case scenario for me, we still win it, but we win sort of like an uber competitive division. Maybe 8-9 wins could win you the NFC North this year. That for me is still the mid. So we win it with 7 or 8 or 9, or we finish second, like on a tie or whatever. That's sort of a mid-case scenario. The worst case one is that we're below 500. You've got to show tangible progress every single season, that you can keep getting better. And if you don't win the conference, if you can't even finish above that is the absolute worst case scenario, that we regress, that Goff regresses, and that everything sort of falls apart. The mental fortitude of this team is broken. That is the worst case scenario, and if that happens, then we've got to tear everything down again. I fully believe that, because it's all about winning at the end of the day. But I would expect us to be on the higher end. I believe in this team. I believe in its mentality. I think it's different to everything we've seen in these past 20 years. And I think even people who don't root for us can see that as well. So I expect us to be in the top end, double digits, and win it.
All right, taking on the Packers as I have to here. Best case scenario is that Jordan Love has a reasonable to average season. I don't think even in the best case he's going to set the world alight. I just don't think you can have that expectation. But if he can be a facilitator in this offense, put the ball in the hands of the playmakers, and make smart decisions at the line, not turn the ball over and otherwise just hand the ball off, don't make mistakes, let your defense go to work. Packers, 10 wins. I mean, if that happens, I really feel like you could be hoping for 10 wins. I don't think you can want more than that. I think it's greedy, but 10 wins is the height of expectation. Where I actually expect the Packers to come in at is that Jordan Love is just not great, but he's not terrible. He's smart with the ball somewhat, but he still makes rookie mistakes and gives the ball away a bit more than he should. But with a favourable-ish schedule, they're going to win some games, and maybe they come in with about 7 to 8 wins. I kind of think almost similarly to the Bears in this respect of where their expectation is. But the worst-case scenario is that Love is just a flat-out bad quarterback, and actually he gets benched halfway through the season because he just can't play, and he's not good enough. That has to be the worst fear for them, is that they bench Love before the end of the season. And you know what? You're hoping that Rashawn Gary is going to be the wrecker that he is, but with the catastrophic injury he had in the previous season, you know, sometimes it takes 2 years to recover from that sort of thing. We've seen it with people like Romeo Okwara at the Lions, you know, that sort of injury takes a while. So, you know, maybe the defense just doesn't quite recover to where it should be, and the offense is just flat out bad with all that young receivers, and you could end up winning 3 games, 2-3 games, and get the number 1 pick. I really think Green Bay are in for the number 1 pick potentially.
But that's a good scenario. That's a good scenario. Like Kieran said earlier, the worst case scenario for the Packers is that they win 6 or 7 games.
Sure,
that middle scenario
I meant pure record though. Like, I mean, purely by record. You're absolutely right. The best case scenario for the Packers might be 2 wins. You're right, but they could actually achieve it in their nightmares. You know what I mean?
And just to say, if they win 10 games, then this Zoom meeting here will be a counselling meeting at the end of the season.
All of our podcasts are counselling meetings.
I don't think any of us have the mental fortitude to deal with a 10-win Jordan Love Packers team. I think that would finish me off.
If that happens.
you know what I was saying though. Purely record based, I think that the Packers are in for that. CJ, Vikings.
I'm going to probably throw it a bit of a curveball, because I don't think you're going to expect me to say what I'm going to say in quite the order that I am probably going to come out with it. I mean, best case scenario for me as a Vikings fan, which is heavily, heavily, heavily unrealistic, would be for the Vikings to go all the way, because it's a case of we need to do it now or never in the situation that we're in, because if we don't do it this year, we're not going to do it, in my opinion, any year soon. Like you say, because obviously we've got a lot of question marks surrounding a lot of players that we need to make those decisions for, which make or break effectively the following 3, 4, 5 seasons that follow on. Middle ground scenario for me would be possibly having, like Kieran said, our worst year. For the reason being, it makes a lot of decisions very, very easy when it comes to moving on of players, moving on of staff. You know, we just had one of the worst years that's physically achievable for a team that really should be competing in more cases than not. And the worst case scenario for me would be to have that middle ground season, which doesn't really answer any questions, because yes, we need to keep this player, or no, we're definitely not keeping those players. You know, having a Jordan Love scenario effectively with Kirk Cousins. You know, he's good enough to keep, but he's just not quite where he needs to be to win it all. Situation, because obviously the last thing that we want is the situation of Kirk Cousins going, yeah, do we extend him? Who do we kind of bring in these places if we don't? You know, could then we get the question of, do you roll with a rookie? You know, do we pull Nick Mullins into QB1, get rid of Cousins and Jaren Hood? You know, the new quarterback that we acquired in the draft, does he come up into QB2? Or vice versa? You know, does he go QB1 with Mullins backing him up and just roll everything out with the rookie? Or do you go down the route that many teams go down of picking up a previously, you know, abandoned quarterback from a different team as a bridge, just obviously to get a rookie a little bit more experience under his belt with another member of the staff in a veteran-esque way in the system? But I think obviously the questions being able to be answered in regards to what decisions need to be made from head office would be a lot more preferable, being either a very, very good season or a very, very bad season, as opposed to being in that middle ground team. But then obviously to finalise it off, and probably would end my life, would be the Packers to go ahead and win everything, because my life wouldn't be worth living at that point.
Yeah, that sounds rough. All right, I got 2 more quick, well, 1 quick question and 1 little fun thing to do at the end here. So, division expectations. Odds checker have the Lions as favourites at 7-5, so that's plus 240 if I'm translating correctly for the Americans. Minnesota Vikings are second at plus 400, that's 3-1 in English odds, and then the Bears and Packers are level at 4-1 each, that's plus 500. Gents, can I have your end of season expectations for the rankings in division? And Kieran, I'll start again with you.
I have the Lions winning the division. Do you mind amount of games or what?
No, just ranking.
No.
That's cool.
You've just been given the kiss of death there, lads.
I think the Lions win the division. I think the Bears come second. I think the Packers come third, and the Vikings come fourth.
And
I'm exactly the same there.
Lions, Bears, Packers, Vikings. Was that?
Yeah, I want the Vikings to start their rebuild before the Packers, so the Packers sit permanently on the bottom. I want the Packers to be mediocre, but not as good as us or the Bears. And then, I want us to stay in front of the Bears. I've got to be honest there. So that's perfect scenario for me.
CJ.
I mean, in an ideal world of a Vikings fan, I would have to say the Vikings win in the North.
All right. Expectation, though.
Expectation. I think pretty much I'm exactly the same as Kieran. We can't afford to finish middle ground. If we're going to finish, second by some pure fluke chance and manage to squeak into the playoffs, to me that would be a bad season. We either need to win the entire thing or not go at all. And when I say not go at all, we need to not go at all with the position of thinking predominantly draft. So I would say the same.
Right. I got a slightly different one. I got the Lions, and then I almost the way the betting is Lions, Vikings second, Bears third, Packers fourth. Just fancy the Vikings that they've held on enough, and they're enough of a stable team that they'll have enough to beat the Bears just about, and I think the Packers really will bottom out. I really think they're going to have a bad season. I don't want them to for the reasons that you've all said, but I do fear them just being an awful team and picking up someone in the draft, unfortunately. Right, last fun thing to do is to pick, perhaps, I don't know if this is going to take too long, so just shout if we've been on long enough and we don't want to do this, but an all NFC North team. And maybe that will annoy some people. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Incredible.
I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. This is probably going to be the most annoying one to pick, potentially. But let's pick a quarterback for the NFC North.
Before we actually get involved into it, this is from any era.
No.
No,
Right now. Pick your
Right
team
now.
currently. Okay. NFC North quarterback. Let's say it's a sort of Pro Bowl style thing where the NFC North is... Actually, why doesn't this happen? NFC North plays the other 8 divisions and the winner gets the accolade. I don't know. That should happen instead of the Pro Bowl. That'd be much better. Anyway.
I get involved with that. I think that would be probably a very, very fun weekend to watch.
It would.
In comparison to Pro Bowl tag football.
Hate it. But anyway, so Cousins, Goff, Love, Fields.
Who wants to go first?
All right, screw it. I'll say Fields. I will.
Yikes! Don't do that.
You're right. Look, let's
Goff doesn't get the love.
Let's be real. Let's be real here. In terms of pure ability, we're assuming everybody's healthy. In terms of pure ability, Fields is a better quarterback. He hasn't been in. If he has a good offensive line, I think you're going to see that. I think Goff, we know what he is, but he works in the system of Detroit, and that's why it's successful. If you put Goff somewhere else, I don't think it works realistically. But the fact that he's in a good system in Detroit, that's where it's good. But if we're picking players based on pure ability, I think we'd be foolish not to pick Justin Fields. Obviously, I said I'm biased in both regards in terms of college football and my team, but it's one that I think if you're giving anybody the opportunity to be that difference-making quarterback, it's going to be him of anybody else in the division.
Me, I would say, well, in regards to obviously the consistency of what you kind of expect, you've got to go Cousins. But obviously, I'm happy with either Goff or Justin Fields as easily a second. I'm easy in that sort of sense. But in terms of knowing what you're going to get as the product, in any way, shape, or form, I've got to say Cousins for just obviously the consistency aspect of it.
Oh, I don't much care between the three, to be honest. In Fields, you got the upside and the rushing threat, but it's going to detract the wide receivers that you pick. Cousins, I mean, are they playing at 1 or are they playing at 4? Because that makes a difference. It doesn't make a difference. I'm glib. But I don't know. You're right about Goff and it being a system thing, but 2 different teams have managed to build a successful team around him.
Was he really successful with the Rams, or was Todd Gurley successful with the Rams?
I mean, he facilitated the team, but he still facilitated the team and didn't
Dino!
make mistakes.
So hang on. So
Hang on, that Chiefs game proved everything.
We cannot say that Justin Fields is going to be great behind it, and we cannot then just dismiss Goff's improvement behind here. This is not just he's got a good O-liner, he's got good wide receivers. He is a good quarterback, and he has proven it. He got dumped by the Rams, put in a city that didn't really want him, and he's won them over. And
there's a
plays
legitimate
at a good
question
level.
at this point as to whether Stafford or Goff is a
can't-
better quarterback.
I wouldn't take
won the
Stafford
Super
back.
Bowl.
I wouldn't take Staff back over Goff for this team right now.
Do you think the Rams regret that trade?
No.
There.
I don't think both
That's
teams
your answer.
do.
That's your.
We
No,
don't.
that's fair. But like,
it's a
when
win-win
that
trade.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that they did it because they didn't believe Goff could win them the Super Bowl, and they thought that they were ready to win the Super Bowl.
I actually think it
And
was
then-
deeper than that. I think that just the head coach was fed up of being limited in the system when he knew that he was smart enough to do a bit more. It wasn't that Goff couldn't win because he proved he could get him to a Super Bowl. It was more that I think that Sean McVay was just frustrated. I was a personality thing.
But then Stafford put them over the edge to where they
Yeah.
actually did win it. So that's where I'm saying where the system quarterback, I understand, like it seems like it's a negative thing, but I think that's just the way it is with him. I think he's in a very good system now that it suits his skill set, and that's why he's successful, right? But I think if you're looking at it as the overall ability, like this is an all-star game type thing, I think when you look at that, Fields, if he's able to do what I think anyway, I think he's, as a pure quarterback, what we look at now, I think he is the better talented player. But look, it's going to come down to how these guys play this year, and whether it's Goff or Fields. I think it's very obvious that they're probably the two guys that teams are looking at this year as they should improve the most of the quarterbacks in the division.
I mean, there's 2 votes already for him, so we've got to go with Justin Fields. So let's move on to running back, and I mean, this is stacked with talent. So I mean,
Alvin Cook.
He's not in the division anymore.
Division.
I know we're doing this in order, but I am going to be an absolute homer here. It's Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's not even close.
He's
you
not
stack all these. You stack all these guys together about their potential ceiling, what they could be as a running back. It's Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna actually be realistic here and say Aaron Jones is probably.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay,
Aaron
cool.
Jones.
Aaron Jones is RB1. I won't pick an RB2. We'll just get on with this. Wide receiver, shall we do... So would you play 11 personnel, so we'll do 3 wide receivers? Justin Jefferson?
Jefferson, 100%.
Okay, but probably the only one from Minnesota, I would imagine. You're probably not taking Addison, and KJ Osborne is fine, but meh. Green Bay, Christian Watson could be a shout. Lions, is Amon-Ra in there? I would argue.
Amon-Ra, 100% for me.
Probably.
He's the second best receiver in the NFC North, so he's in there.
Yeah.
Okay, and DJ Moore?
100%.
That's actually quite a great unit, that is.
It's a nice unit. All right, cool. Feels like there's agreement there. Tight ends is going to be interesting, though. We've got Cole Kmet, we've got Sam Laporta. I'm not going to mention anyone in Green Bay because I don't believe in that. TJ Hawkinson. It feels like Hawk is probably the guy there.
Kmet. I'm putting Kmet in there.
Cole Kmet.
Kmet is a lot better than TJ.
If we're putting 2, I'm putting Cole Kmet and Robert Tonyan in there.
Whoa, no. Cole. In fact, no, I'll say Cole Kmet when he plays us, because he's like the best tight end that ever lived every time he plays against us. So
I mean,
Kmet's definitely in there.
The best tight end that ever lived against us, the Vikings let go at the end of this offseason, which is Irv Smith. He destroyed us every single time he touched the field against us. But anyway, moving on from that. Okay, so we've got Cole Kmet in as tight end 1. Offensive line, let's go left tackle. We've got Braxton Jones, who...
Darisaw.
I know the... Darisaw over Decker.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm not afraid to say it.
And we're going to discount Bakhtiari based on injury history?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Left guard, Elton Jenkins, Tevin Jenkins, Jonah Jackson, Ezra Cleveland.
I'm being a homer here. Jonah is the best left guard in the league.
Elton,
for me, it's Elton Jenkins.
It's Elton Jenkins for me.
It depends where you put him. He plays all over, so he's a... I don't think left guard's his natural home.
No, but I think it is his home at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm going Elton Jenkins. I love Jonah, but all right, centre.
Wow.
Centre.
Not Garrett fucking Bradbury.
Not the Bears.
Cody Whitehair or Lucas Patrick, Frank Ragnow, Josh Myers, Garrett Bradbury.
Frank.
It's Frank.
I've got to say Big Frank.
Frank, he's the best in the NFL.
Agreed.
Don't care.
He's playing with 9 toes.
One of them's literally dead. Anyway.
It is.
Yeah. Right guards. Nate Davis, Halapulavati Vaitai, John Runyon, Ed Ingram.
I thought Tevin Jenkins played right guard for the Bears.
Yeah, he moved to left guard this year. I would put him at right guard of them, but Nate Davis, because look, he was great with the Titans, so I can't say him because he's not played in the NFC North yet. So of those, I'd pick probably the Lions right guard, just because the rest of them are kind of trash.
It feels like Vaitai needs to prove his fitness. So to me, I'd be tempted to go Nate Davis.
Of the players there, he's probably the best one in terms of pure talent. But hopefully so.
I feel like Big V's the best of them, like David Bakhtiari is the best of them, but can he actually stay healthy? Is a massive
That's the question.
Right tackle. Darnell Wright,
Yeah.
Penei Sewell, Josh Neiman.
Let's just stop.
Brian okay, so Vikings fans I have had a big argument on social media with because Brian O'Neill is an absolute beast. And I have had the argument. I'm going Penei Sewell. It's not a question in my mind, but CJ, speak to me here. You've got to be a Brian O'Neill fan, right?
I'm a big Brian O'Neill fan. He's for me one of the bright spots that was initially like one of the OGs going back some years. Obviously, we've got Ed Ingram and Edric Cleveland that have stepped up significantly since they've been drafted in. But Brian O'Neill was, one of the ones that was dependable, if you will.
I think he rated more highly on PFF in the last 2 years than Sewell. I think that was the argument that had most at me.
We saw yesterday with our tape watching that PFF grading linemen are useless.
They're not the best. Okay. For the sake of argument, I'm going to pick a 4-3. I know that the Packers play 3-4 and the Vikings play 3-4, so it feels a little bit unfair, but we can shoehorn outside linebackers into defensive ends and just try and make it work. So let's go for defensive ends, and I'll just choose the starters that are on ESPN, and if you want to venture anyone else, then that's fine. Bears, Travis Gibson and DeMarcus Walker. Lions, Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston. Packers, Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt, but that doesn't feel fair. That's not right. Preston Smith or Rashawn Gary, outside linebackers both. And for the Vikings, it is Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport.
Kenny Clark is not an edge rusher.
No. I changed it. I read out the DNs in a 3 instead of the outside linebackers in the 4. So Packers, is Rashawn Gary or Preston Smith.
This is tough. I think Aiden Hutchinson is a definite, but then I'm between Gary and Danielle Hunter.
I feel like Danielle Hunter's done it longer.
Yeah.
And he's
less injured.
Yeah.
And the thing is that Vikings defense is noticeably significantly better when he's on the field. So
he's a beast.
I'd put in Hunter and I'd put in Hutch.
Yeah,
Hutch and Hunter when they're healthy.
Yeah.
All right, I'm with you all on that. Defensive tackles, Andrew Billings and Justin Jones, but actually backed up by Zach Pickens and Gervon Dexter in draft picks. Lions have Ali McNeil and Isaiah Buggs. Packers have Kenny Clark, TJ Sace, and Devontae Wyatt in the interior, and the Vikings have Dean Lowry, Kairos Tonga, and Harrison Phillips.
This is tough.
It's tough, but not for a good reason.
No, it's for a very bad reason.
Kenny Clark?
Yes, 100%. I was actually going to pick the 2 Packers players, to be honest.
Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt.
Yeah.
Kenny and Aleem.
I do like Aleem. And he had a big breakout couple of games last year, but is it enough?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, CJ? Justin Jones had a good year last year, didn't he?
See, I feel like
Yeah.
DTs are underappreciated and are only really appreciated by the fans of their own team. It's like I wouldn't really expect Bears and Vikings fans to know about Aleem as much as we do, but vice versa for theirs. I wouldn't be able to say much about the Bears or the Vikings.
Justin Jones, correct me if I'm wrong, he signed a
I
massive
appreciate
deal to
it.
stay, didn't he? Was that
No.
Jones? Oh, I'm thinking of a different team.
No, he
No.
he signed a 2 or 3 year deal last year.
Ah, okay.
They tried to give a big deal to Ojan. Was it Larry Ogunjobi or whatever? They
Yeah.
tried to give a big deal
Ogunjobi,
to him,
yeah.
but he failed his physical.
Hmm.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So the two Packers players,
Probably.
Clark and Wyatt.
I think they're the best too. If you're taking pure talent, it's hard because they're different positions, right? Like whether it's 3 tech, nose tackle, 1 tech.
I guess I think with
pure
Wyatt, it's
guys.
about projection though, because he didn't do it last year. I'd take Aleem.
I'm putting
actually.
Aleem in there.
Yeah.
This is a Lions pod. We have to have a few things where we get
Right.
to wield
Clark.
power.
Let's go
Fair
Clark
enough.
and let's go Clark and right. Let's go for linebackers. So we've got TJ and Tremaine Edmonds. We've got Alex Anzalone, and I'm not putting Malcolm in there, am I? Let's go Jack Campbell as that guy. For the Packers, it's Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker. And for the Vikings, it is apparently Brian Asamoah and Jordan Hicks.
Well, Tremaine obviously gets in there.
Yeah.
Who next?
I'm going to be a homer and I'm going to say Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards because I think TJ Edwards had one of the best performances last year on a team that made the Super Bowl.
I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with Brian Asamoah, so I've got to go him. But as for my second, I am struggling to kind of pick one out. Because again, similar to what Ant is saying, I don't watch a great deal of Bears games, Packers games, and Lions games to kind of go, oh, that's a standout player immediately from the get-go.
You know, I might put Devondre Campbell in there.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way.
The Packers have been rubbish with the linebackers over the years, but he's been really good for them. I think I love our linebackers, but they've not done it over a sustained period of time yet.
So which Bears one will we taking? Who's the best
Tremaine.
linebacker of those two? Tremaine Edmonds.
Tremaine's
Tremaine
the best in the conference by I think a long shot.
Division.
In the conference, maybe.
Do you think? Okay,
He
all
was
right.
widely sought after.
Yeah, he was. True.
I would have loved to have had him
Okay,
here. But...
I would also go Devondre Campbell. I know he had a little bit of a down year last year, but the year before that was exceptional. All right, I maybe agreed to disagree on some of those. Cornerbacks. So Bears are Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson, backed up by Kyler Gordon. Lions are Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley. Packers, Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas, backed up by Eric Stokes. And the Vikings, Andrew Booth and Byron Murphy.
For me, this is probably
Jair
Jair Alexander and probably maybe Jalen Johnson. I don't like any of the other guys in the division, to be honest.
I put Jair in there.
I'm torn between...
I mean, I can't say our guys because I've not seen them play for us yet. It's hard for me to say that. I mean, I know they're good, but...
I'd be tempted to put Byron Murphy in there.
I wouldn't.
I was going to say Byron Murphy, but again, going off the fact of what Ant just said, I've not seen him play for the Vikings. This is predominantly going off his performance.
You know what?
Team.
I put Jerry in, but these two won't know about Jerry.
Who the fuck is Jerry?
Jerry Jacobs, undrafted free agent in 2021.
Jerry's one of the best corners. He's here.
He was very good, but I don't think he's quite up there.
Jalen Johnson's a better cornerback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to give that.
Okay, all right. So we're going
Jair
Jair and Jalen as the outside guys. Now, because of the way that ESPN does this, I don't really know the nickel hybrid guys, so you might have to advise me, people, on who your nickel hybrid safety guy might be. Kieran, for the Bears.
Bears is Kyler Gordon.
Okay, that's Kyler Gordon.
Why don't we just do safeties? Why don't we just make it easy instead of doing...
Well,
Cool.
we'll
Yeah,
get
the
it.
safety.
Nickel's a position as well. That's
Nickel's a
important.
position,
Yeah.
definitely. CJ, who's the nickel for the Vikings? Do you expect?
Shandon Sullivan, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll take your word for it. I can't see him there. But yeah, okay. For the Packers, I guess it's Eric Stokes. I think it's Eric Stokes. For the Lions, it's going to be Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Stokes is an outside corner.
Is he?
Yeah.
All right.
Not a nickel.
Is it Rasul Douglas then? I don't know. I'm not
Probably.
sure.
Theirs is.
Or is it? I don't know who it is. Never mind. Anyway, it's not going to be any of them. So, I'm just going to venture CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, I would say that because for me, Kyler Gordon only came on at the end of the season, so
It
I think
could be-
CJ has more of a proven track record, I think, in the league.
I love Kyler Gordon. I think he's going to come up big. But yeah, he needs a big year this year to do it, I think. All right, pure safeties, strong or free, don't care. Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson, Kirby Joseph and Tracy Walker, backed up by Brian Branch. Jonathan Owens and Darnell Savage for the Packers, Vikings, Harrison Smith and Cameron Bynum, backed up by Lewis Seen.
Well, Eddie's in there.
Eddie Jackson's definitely in there.
Eddie and Kirby.
I've got to say Harrison Smith because he's just my guy, the hitman. Lewis Steen, I would like to see more of. Obviously, what happened to him was a crying shame. It'd be interesting to see what he can do when he's back on the field this year.
Yeah, Eddie Jackson's a lock.
Yeah, I don't like a lot of the other strong safeties on this. I like Jaquan Brisker, but I don't think he's proven enough. So you probably are going to have to put Kirby in there, but I wouldn't feel good about it.
As an ascending player, I will prefer Kirby over Harrison Smith, despite Harrison Smith obviously proving a hell of a lot in his career, but I just think he's falling off a little, but it's very close to me, right? Kicker, Caro Santos, Michael Badgley.
What's a kicker?
Yeah. Anders Carlson and Greg Joseph.
Flip a coin.
Greg Joseph?
Who's the youngest?
Greg Joseph would be very, very consistent for the most part for us. So,
and then
he consistently misses against us, doesn't he? He's
does.
been good against us in the last few games. So yeah, you can keep him.
All right, and then punter Trenton Gill, Jack Fox, Pat O'Donnell, Ryan Wright. It's Jack Fox. Let's move on. That's the one where I'm putting my foot down. Jack Fox, best in the league, bar none.
What position does he play?
Get bullish on one position. Yes, I know, but there we go. Right. So I reckon that'd be damn competitive, apart from against the AFC West. I think that's a damn good team.
I love our joint receiver core. I think DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, you'd struggle to match those three.
Yeah. That's nice.
There. Anyway, okay. That is going to bring us to the end of this, I think. Guys, thank you so much for pulling a shift with us because it's been a long one. Kieran, just remind us where you are and where to find you because I'm sure a lot of the guys in the chat, loads of thanks coming in all the way through the show about you guys and how knowledgeable you are and how nice people you are to have on the show. So hopefully you'll come back again. Just remind us where to find you.
Yeah, not all Bears fans are mean to Lions fans. Yeah, you can find me at Irish Bear Show over on Twitter, and also over on YouTube. We try and get all the kind of beat reporters and stuff on during the season, doing like reviews and stuff like that, and we try and make it as balanced as possible as well. So again, when it comes to kind of the divisional matchups, we try and get guys from kind of the different teams as well. So again, come on over if you're interested in when those matchups come ahead. And yeah, appreciate you guys for inviting me on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been. It's been great. And CJ, you're on our Discord, I know, and the guys will be able to come and chat to you there. But you want to throw out your socials as well, Twitter and what have you?
Not really got any socials per Minnesota Vikings as such. Obviously, when I'm over in the States, coming from week 4, you can follow my progress and what I'm getting up to on Wolverine Tree at Instagram. Obviously, feel free to shout me out in the Lions Discord as such if you want to get at me and wind me up on Facebook. I'm happy enough to provide details for that without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, I'm not passing out mobile numbers because I'm not looking forward to those 4 o'clock in the morning calls when the Lions have decided that they want to beat us on a Monday Night Football or something like that, where they can start ringing me up just laughing down the phone, or the very, very creepy sort of phone calls, which can get a little bit scary. But obviously, once we get something organised on the Vikings side, because I know obviously the UK Vikings fans that do a fair bit on their Twitter, but I'm not associated with them podcast wise or anything like that. But if I choose to go obviously out on my own accord, then obviously I'll throw the socials out. And as you always ask me, Matt, where can you find me, and what I am about when it comes to Minnesota Vikings. I'm a member of the Viking World Order because I know that was going to possibly at some point crop up. Viking World Order, it will effectively set up as a collective group of super fans in Minnesota to keep the team in the state when we're looking at effectively moving on the back of the stadium deal, and it was a campaigning act to get the stadium built at US Bank Stadium. But now, obviously, since there is no requirement to keep the team in the state, we're doing more often than not a lot of charitable work, be that what it may. It spans the majority of the states. Obviously, I'm trying to get bits and pieces running over here from a charity perspective, seeing what I can kind of bring out where we can. But I'm looking at potentially doing that through the sport of airsoft, which I've just got involved in about this time last year, and trying to obviously bring in men's mental health. And unfortunately for some, one of my close friends in Warrington, where I'm now living, he has informed me that his nan sadly is in hospice care, and some point last week he got a phone call saying that she's possibly in her last couple of days. So one of our first charitable events, if we will be an organised airsoft game in her memory, with donations coming through and far between.
That's really lovely, man. Best of luck with that. And
thank you very much.
That's really nice. Right, everyone, our next show is going to be on the college podcast on Wednesday, and it was Sunbelt Part 1, so I'm presuming it's Sunbelt Part 2 on Wednesday.
Yeah, we did the East last week, and we're doing the West this week.
All right, and training camp preview on the main podcast coming on Monday. We also will have tape review for Hendon Hooker and Brian Branch on Sunday, so come and watch that, because that's going to be a lot of fun, especially Tennessee-Alabama game, particularly, which we're going to profile. You know where to find us on the socials. I won't bore you with that. But people, it's been a long one. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Wednesday for the college show. But for now, let's go Lions, One Pride.